Hey guys, tonight we're waking up in one of those years that looks magnificent from a safe historical distance. 1776. Liberty, revolution, independence, powdered wigs, dramatic signatures, men standing heroically beside flags while orchestral music appears from nowhere. But ordinary life in 1776 was considerably less interested in becoming a painting. For most people, the day was about getting the fire going, hauling water, keeping food from spoiling, repairing something that had broken yesterday, finding out whether the cow had developed a new opinion about cooperation, and completing enough physical labour before sunset that everybody could continue doing exactly the same thing tomorrow. Meanwhile, somewhere in the background an empire was collapsing. So tonight we're stepping past the famous speeches and into the houses, workshops, fields, kitchens, taverns, roads, ports, farms, and muddy little communities where people actually lived. Because while Thomas Jefferson was arranging sentences about human equality, somebody else was scraping yesterday's porridge from an iron pot with a wooden spoon and wondering whether the chimney was supposed to smoke this much. And that somebody is going to be you. Now, 1776 America is difficult to describe as one single place, because it absolutely was not one single place. Life on a Massachusetts farm was different from life on a Virginia plantation. Philadelphia was not the Carolina backcountry. A merchant's household in Boston had little in common with a frontier cabin beyond the shared belief that winter had become unnecessarily personal. And the experience of a free white farmer was profoundly different from that of an enslaved black labourer, a free black artisan, an indigenous family living beyond or beside colonial settlement, a woman whose legal rights were heavily restricted, or a child who had made the unfortunate mistake of becoming old enough to carry something. So we're going to move through all of it. Not every person experienced every part of this world, but together these routines reveal what ordinary life really meant in the year that Americans later turned into mythology. If you're enjoying these long journeys into the bits of history that school somehow skipped, because apparently there wasn't enough time between battles, please like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. It helps the channel enormously, and I'm very grateful you're here. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Someone is always listening at an hour when sensible people have stopped making decisions, and I find that reassuring. Also, we're on Spotify now, so if you'd rather listen there while falling asleep, you'll find the link in the description. For now, dim the lights, put a fan on if you've got one, pull the blanket up, move the pillow into that exact position you will somehow decide is wrong again in 11 minutes. Get truly comfortable, because tonight you are going to develop a passionate appreciation for indoor plumbing, refrigeration, antibiotics, central heating, washing machines, mattresses, supermarkets, weather forecasts, dental anaesthetic, and the revolutionary modern concept of not having livestock immediately outside your bedroom. But before we begin, let's consider a few questions. What did an ordinary American actually wake up on in 1776? How long did it take to get dressed when buttons were expensive and almost everything you owned had been sewn by hand? Did people bathe? Did they brush their teeth? What happened when you needed the toilet at 3 a.m. and the temperature outside was below freezing? What did breakfast look like when there were no refrigerators, no boxed cereal, and the nearest supermarket would not exist for roughly another century and a half? How far did you walk for water? How many hours did women spend producing the basic things a household needed before anyone had the confidence to call what they were doing housework? What did children do all day? And at what age did childhood quietly become employment? What happened when the doctor arrived? Was that good news? How did you travel 20 miles when the road was mud? Your wagon had no suspension worth mentioning, and every bridge appeared to have been constructed by a committee with personal grievances against wheels. How quickly did news travel? If Congress declared independence hundreds of miles away, when did you actually hear about it? And when someone eventually told you that you were now living in an independent country, were you excited, terrified, furious, confused, or mainly wondering whether this changed the price of flour? What if your neighbour supported independence and you supported the king? What if you supported neither and simply wanted everybody with a musket to stop borrowing your horse? What did war feel like when it arrived not as a chapter in a textbook, but as soldiers requiring food, wagons, blankets, quarters, labour, money, information, and occasionally your eldest son? And most importantly, if you woke up in America in 1776 with all your modern expectations intact, how long would you last before requesting to speak to whoever was responsible for the 18th century? Congratulations. You've just woken up somewhere in the 13 colonies. It is 1776. There is no electricity. There is no running water. There is no indoor bathroom. There is no refrigeration. Your mattress contains organic material that has already attracted tenants. Britain is at war with people who, depending on which month it is and who you ask, may still technically be British. A rooster has begun screaming outside for reasons known only to the rooster, and you need to get up because daylight is valuable and nobody has invented the snooze button. Welcome to revolutionary America. The revolution can wait. The fire has gone out. 1. You wake up in a house where privacy is mostly a theoretical concept. Let's start with the house. Because before you can worry about taxation without representation, British troops, continental currency, or whether the colonies are about to become an actual country, you first need somewhere to wake up. And for most ordinary people in 1776 America, home is considerably smaller, darker, smokier, and more crowded than the beautifully restored colonial houses you visit today, with polished floorboards and a volunteer named Margaret explaining the butter churn. If you live in the countryside, which most people do, your house depends heavily on where you are, how much money you have, and how long your family has been established. In New England, you might live in a timber frame house with a huge central chimney. In Pennsylvania, stone construction is common in some settled areas, particularly among prosperous families. Farther south, frame houses dominate many communities, while log buildings appear especially on newer settlements and frontiers. If your family has only recently cleared the land, the first house may be extremely simple. 1 room, perhaps 2. Congratulations on the open-plan lifestyle. The main room has to perform almost every domestic function humanity has invented. The hearth occupies 1 wall and dominates the room because fire governs much of the household. Nearby are stools, benches, perhaps a table, storage chests, cooking equipment, spinning tools, baskets, food, clothing, and whatever else your family owns that cannot safely be left outside. You eat here. You work here. You repair things here. Children play here. Someone may sleep here. Babies cry here. Visitors are received here. Someone is trying to prepare supper while another person fixes a harness 3 feet away and a child has discovered a particularly loud piece of wood. Privacy is not exactly absent. It is simply considered a luxury item. Bedrooms exist in larger homes, of course, but even then they are rarely the private sanctuaries modern people expect. Several children may share 1 room. Siblings share beds. Parents may sleep with infants nearby. Servants, apprentices, hired labourers, or extended family members may occupy whatever spaces can reasonably contain a human body overnight. Beds can appear in rooms that have other purposes during the day. In smaller cabins, the sleeping arrangements are essentially an exercise in fitting everyone inside before the weather does. And then there is the temperature. Colonial houses are not insulated to anything approaching modern standards. Glass windows are expensive, especially in poorer or newer settlements. Small houses may have few windows, and shutters help control wind and weather. Cracks in walls, gaps around doors, and imperfect construction allow cold air to enter with extraordinary confidence. The fire provides warmth, mostly to whichever side of you is facing it. Your front becomes pleasantly toasted while your back begins considering whether hypothermia is politically neutral. In summer, the problem reverses. The house grows hot. Smoke from the hearth hangs in the room when the chimney draws poorly. Flies arrive. Mosquitoes investigate. Food smells mingle with sweat, damp wool, wood smoke, leather, livestock, candles, soap, drying herbs, and whatever somebody has recently brought in on their boots. The result is not necessarily filthy by 18th century standards. It is simply extremely alive. Animals may be close to the house as well. Chickens scratch around the yard. Pigs are nearby. Horses and cattle occupy barns or outbuildings if the household is prosperous enough to have them. Dogs wander through domestic life with the confidence of creatures that have never heard anyone use the phrase pet-free furniture. Your home is also your storage system. There is no garage filled with plastic containers and things you promise to sort next spring. Chests hold clothing and linen. Pegs support tools and garments. Shelves carry bowls, plates, jars, and cooking vessels. Dried food may hang overhead. Herbs can be suspended from beams. Barrels contain flour, grain, cider, salted meat, or other supplies. Everything important is kept somewhere visible, because ordinary households cannot afford large collections of unnecessary objects. What you own has a job, usually several, and because almost everything has been made slowly, bought carefully, inherited, repaired, traded, or produced by someone you know, possessions carry more weight than their modern equivalents. A chair is not just a chair. It may be one of 4 chairs. Breaking it becomes an event. You lie there for another moment, listening to the building wake around you. Floorboards creak, someone coughs, a child whispers, the wind finds a gap in the wall that nobody managed to fix last autumn. From outside comes the unmistakable sound of a rooster announcing dawn as though personally responsible for arranging it. You are awake in 1776. You have almost no privacy. The house is cold. Several other people are already moving around you. And somewhere beyond these walls a revolution is gathering momentum. But none of that matters yet, because the fire has gone out. 2. Your mattress is straw, feathers, rope, and a small independent ecosystem. Now let's deal with the bed. Because after spending the night in a house shared with children, relatives, perhaps an apprentice, possibly a servant, and several insects who have mistaken your skin for a public dining establishment, you might reasonably hope that the mattress itself has at least been designed with comfort in mind. This is optimistic. Your bed in 1776 depends enormously on wealth. If your household is prosperous, you may sleep on a substantial wooden bedstead fitted with ropes or woven supports beneath a mattress stuffed with feathers. A good feather bed is valuable property, genuinely valuable. Beds, bedsteads, curtains, blankets, and linens frequently appear prominently in household inventories because they represent considerable labour and expense. If you own one, you look after it. If you do not, you may be sleeping on something rather less luxurious. Straw is common stuffing for poorer mattresses. Depending on region and circumstance, dried leaves, corn husks, wool, flock, or other available materials can also provide padding. And the important word there is padding, not comfort. Padding. There is a difference. A freshly filled straw mattress can actually be reasonably pleasant. The material has some spring to it. It smells faintly sweet and dry. You can redistribute it by shaking or turning the bedding, pushing the contents back into places where your hips have spent several nights creating geographical depressions. Eventually, though, straw compresses. It breaks down. It absorbs moisture. It develops lumps. And because this is a world where virtually every useful organic material eventually attracts something that wants to eat it, live in it, or both, the mattress also becomes an attractive residential opportunity. Bed bugs are not an 18th century novelty, and fleas and lice are familiar household nuisances. People know perfectly well that these creatures exist. They sweep, air bedding, wash linens, shake mattresses, expose things to sunlight, use herbs or other household remedies, and generally conduct an ongoing campaign against anything that regards the bed as shared accommodation. The campaign is not always successful. You wake with bites. You scratch them. You search the seams. You find nothing. The insects have won this particular round through superior operational security. Beneath the mattress, the bedstead itself may use a web of ropes stretched across the frame to provide support. These ropes loosen with use and need tightening periodically. When properly tensioned, they create a reasonably supportive base. When they are not, the centre of the bed slowly develops ambitions of becoming a hammock. You and whoever shares the mattress begin migrating toward the middle during the night. This is romantic for perhaps 8 seconds. Then somebody's elbow arrives. And yes, sharing beds is normal. Children commonly sleep together. Siblings pile into the same bed for warmth and practicality. Married couples share, obviously. Travellers at inns may find themselves sharing sleeping spaces with people they met shortly before lying down, because the modern expectation that every paying guest receives a private climate-controlled room with 4 pillows and a small shampoo bottle has not yet entered civilization. Beds are expensive. Space is expensive. Heat is precious. Privacy has already had a difficult morning. In colder weather, sharing makes excellent practical sense. Houses lose heat quickly, and bedrooms may contain no separate fireplace. Bed curtains in wealthier homes help trap warmth around the sleeper, creating a small pocket of relatively tolerable air while the rest of the room cools overnight. Blankets are woolen, sheets, if you have them, are commonly linen, Both require tremendous labour to produce, which means bedding is washed and maintained carefully rather than casually replaced because you have decided this year's preferred colour is sage green. The same principle applies to the mattress. You mend the ticking, you replace stuffing, you tighten ropes, you air everything when weather permits. You perform maintenance because the bed has to last. Eventually, pale morning light begins creeping through the shutters. The person beside you moves. Somewhere nearby, a child has already started talking. You remain still for another few seconds, pressed into a mattress filled with agricultural material, suspended over a network of rope, wrapped in wool, and sharing the immediate area with several forms of life you have not invited. You are not well rested, but you are technically horizontal. In 1776, that counts as luxury, and now you have to get up, because the fire is cold. 3. The fire is out, so civilization has temporarily been cancelled. Next comes the hearth, because in 1776 the fire is not something you switch on when the room feels slightly chilly. It is the centre of domestic life. It cooks your food. It heats your water. It dries damp clothing. It warms the room. It provides light after sunset. It heats irons. It boils laundry water. It helps preserve food. And in winter it performs the fairly important secondary function of preventing everyone in the household from slowly becoming part of the furniture through cold. So when you wake and discover that the fire has gone out completely, this is not a minor inconvenience. This is infrastructure failure. Ideally, someone prepared for morning before going to bed. The evening fire was allowed to burn down, and the glowing coals were covered carefully with ash. This reduces the airflow and lets the embers survive for hours. In the morning you uncover them. A faint orange glow appears. You add dry tinder, perhaps wood shavings, bark, dried grass, scraps of cloth or another material that catches quickly. Then kindling. Then larger wood. You blow gently. Smoke rises directly into your face. You cough. You blow again. Nothing. You reconsider whether independence from Britain is really the most urgent crisis facing the colonies. Eventually a small flame catches. This is a good morning. If the embers have died completely, however, you need to create fire from the beginning. Flint and steel are among the usual tools. You strike steel against flint, producing sparks that must land on suitable tinder, often charred cloth or another easily ignited material. The spark is tiny. The tinder smoulders. You nurse it carefully into flame. This requires patience, practiced hands, and the ability not to become personally offended by a piece of cloth. People who perform this task regularly become efficient at it. You, arriving from the modern world with decades of experience pressing buttons, would probably spend 14 minutes striking two objects together before quietly accusing the 18th century of being badly designed. Once the fire is established, it must be maintained. And maintaining it means fuel. Wood does not appear beside the hearth because a delivery driver received a notification. Someone cuts it, someone splits it, someone stacks it, someone carries it inside. In heavily settled areas where timber has become scarcer, fuel can require even more planning and expense. In some towns and cities, households purchase firewood brought in from surrounding areas. Every flame represents labour, which is why you do not casually leave the front door hanging open while heating the house. Your mother in 1776 does not need to ask whether you are trying to warm the entire neighbourhood. She knows exactly how many hours went into that wood pile. Cooking makes the hearth even more complicated. There is no thermostatically controlled oven quietly maintaining 350 degrees. You have flames, embers, iron pots, kettles, pans, spits, hooks, trivets, and experience. A skilled cook learns to read heat almost instinctively. Pots can hang from cranes or hooks over the fire. Food may cook beside hot coals rather than directly above flames. Baking can be done in a brick oven where available, heated first by burning wood inside and then removing the embers before the food goes in. Temperature is judged through practice. Too cool, and the bread sits there contemplating its future. Too hot, and breakfast becomes charcoal. Open hearth cooking is also dangerous. Long skirts, loose clothing, sparks, boiling liquids, heavy iron vessels, and exposed flame share the same small working area. Burns are common risks. Smoke is another constant companion. A properly functioning chimney carries much of it upward, but chimneys do not always behave. Wind direction, damp fuel, poor construction, soot build-up, or a cold flue can send smoke rolling back into the room. Your eyes water, your throat tightens. The ceiling gradually darkens. Everything develops that permanent wood smoke scent which later generations will pay surprising amounts of money to recreate in expensive candles. To you, it is simply Tuesday. Eventually the flame strengthens. The iron kettle begins to warm. The room becomes fractionally less hostile. Somebody places a pot near the fire. A child edges closer with cold hands. The household begins moving properly now, because the hearth has returned from the dead and civilization has been restored. For the moment, you stand there enjoying the warmth. Then somebody hands you an empty bucket, because the fire is burning. And now it needs water. 4. Washing yourself means cold water and a very flexible definition of clean. Once the fire is alive, you can begin considering the possibility of becoming clean. Not clean in the modern sense. Do not get carried away. You are not about to step into a hot shower, stand there for 12 minutes thinking about absolutely nothing. Use 3 different products that all claim to contain something called deep moisture and emerge wrapped in a towel that was washed by a machine while you were asleep. You are in 1776. Water is work. If you want some, somebody has to fetch it. Perhaps from a well in the yard, perhaps from a spring, perhaps from a communal pump if you live in a town. Wherever it comes from, it must be hauled back in a bucket whose handle becomes noticeably less comfortable with every step. And because water is heavy, nobody is particularly interested in wasting it, so you can have what the 21st century would describe as a refreshing morning rinse. You begin with your face and hands. These matter. They are visible. They also accumulate soot, grease, dirt, sweat, flour, animal hair, garden soil, wood dust, and whatever else yesterday decided to attach to you. A basin may be placed near the hearth. If the household can spare the fuel and time, some water may be warmed. More often, especially early in the morning, you simply confront the temperature as it is. You dip the cloth. You touch it to your face. Your entire nervous system becomes briefly patriotic. Cold water in an unheated room has a remarkable ability to clarify your priorities. You wash around the eyes, the mouth, the neck, perhaps behind the ears if ambition has survived this far. Hands receive more attention because 18th century hands do everything. They knead dough, milk cows, handle tools, prepare meat, feed children, clean pots, carry wood, work soil, and then, with the magnificent confidence of a civilization that does not yet understand microbes, they also prepare lunch. Soap exists, of course. Colonial households commonly make it from animal fat or grease combined with lye produced from wood ashes. The resulting soap is useful for laundry and household cleaning and can also be used on the body. Though nobody has spent millions developing a fragrance called Alpine Rainfall and putting it into an ergonomic pump bottle, it smells like soap, properly 18th century soap, functional, assertive, slightly agricultural. Full bathing is another matter. People do bathe, and habits vary by household, region, season, wealth, and individual preference. The popular idea that everyone in the 18th century simply refused to touch water is exaggerated. People washed themselves in pieces, used basins and cloths, changed linen, swam in warm weather, and sometimes took fuller baths. But daily full-body immersion is not the standard routine. The logistics alone discourage enthusiasm. A tub has to exist. It has to be brought into an appropriate room. Water must be fetched, then heated, bucket by bucket. The tub must be filled. You get into it. The water begins cooling almost immediately. Then every single bucket has to be removed again. A modern bath is relaxation. An 18th century bath is a small domestic engineering project, which is why washing tends to be targeted. Face, hands, neck, feet, other areas as required. The parts the public can see receive priority, helped enormously by clean linen. Your shirt or shift sits directly against the skin and absorbs sweat and body oils. Changing these undergarments regularly is an important part of personal cleanliness. Outer garments, especially expensive woolen coats and gowns, are brushed, aired, spot cleaned, and maintained rather than constantly immersed in water. This makes practical sense. Clothes are expensive. Washing is hard on fabric. Drying heavy wool in damp weather is not an activity anybody volunteers for twice. Hair requires its own management. You comb it regularly, partly for appearance and partly because combing helps remove dirt and, with luck, unwanted residents. Fine-toothed combs have a very specific job. You know what that job is. Nobody needs to say it aloud. Lice are common enough that personal grooming can quietly become a search operation. You comb, you inspect, you find something, you decide this is now a family matter. By the time you're finished, your face is clean, your hands are less alarming, your linen is relatively fresh, and your hair has passed inspection. You would not satisfy a modern bathroom advertisement, but by the standards of your own household you are presentable, and that is fortunate, because now you have to get dressed, which means putting on several hundred hours of somebody else's labour. 5. Getting dressed means putting on someone's entire working week. Now you need clothes. Which sounds simple until you remember that almost nothing you are about to put on has come from a factory in the modern sense. There is no enormous global supply chain quietly producing $12 shirts in 6 colours. There is wool, there is flax, there is leather. There are needles, spinning wheels, looms, scissors, dye pots, sore fingers, long evenings, and an extraordinary amount of human time. If you are an ordinary person in 1776, clothing is valuable because cloth itself is valuable. Before a linen shirt can become a linen shirt, somebody has to grow flax, then harvest it, dry it, break the stalks, separate the fibres, comb them, spin them into thread, weave the thread into cloth, bleach or dye it if required, cut the fabric, then sew the entire garment by hand. Wool follows its own equally cheerful journey through sheep shearing, cleaning, carding, spinning, weaving, fulling, dyeing, cutting and sewing. By the time you pull on a shirt, you are wearing the conclusion of a process that has occupied several people for longer than you would like to calculate before breakfast. This is why clothing is maintained with almost religious commitment. A rip is repaired, then repaired again. A worn cuff is turned. A damaged section is patched. Buttons are replaced. Garments are altered for another family member. Children inherit clothing from older siblings, assuming the older sibling has left enough of the original fabric intact to identify what the garment was. Nothing is casually thrown away. A shirt can continue existing long after it has become more patch than shirt, supported mainly by optimism and thread. Your first layer is usually linen. For men, this means a shirt worn against the skin. It is long, loose, and serves partly as underwear because separate modern underpants are not waiting in the drawer. For women, the equivalent is the shift, a simple linen garment worn beneath everything else. This layer matters because it absorbs sweat and body oils and can be washed more easily than expensive outer clothing. Above that, things become more complicated. A working man might pull on breeches, usually fastening around the knee, or in some contexts longer trousers, particularly among sailors and certain labourers. Over the shirt comes a waistcoat, and then perhaps a coat, if weather, occupation and circumstances require it. Stockings cover the lower legs. Shoes go on eventually, and unless you are working bareheaded, which becomes more likely during hard labour, a hat is part of ordinary outdoor dress. The hat is practical. It keeps off sun. It helps with rain. It provides warmth. It also announces that you are dressed rather than wandering outside halfway through the process. For women, the layers are different but equally purposeful. You begin with the shift. Then stays may shape and support the torso, especially among women of middling and wealthier households, though the exact clothing worn varies greatly by occupation, region, age, and means. Petticoats provide warmth and structure. A gown, jacket, or short gown goes over the upper body according to circumstance. An apron is almost essential working equipment. It protects the more expensive clothing underneath and can be used for carrying vegetables, wiping hands, holding tools, lifting hot objects with questionable judgment, and approximately 40 other tasks nobody included in the original design. A cap or kerchief may cover the hair. This is partly modesty, partly fashion, and partly practical recognition that hair has no useful role in butter making. Colours are not limited to the muddy browns that historical films sometimes assign to everyone who is not wealthy. 18th century clothing can be surprisingly colourful. Dyes produce blues, reds, yellows, greens, browns, and other shades, although cost and availability vary. The wealthy can afford finer fabrics, brighter colours, fashionable cuts, imported textiles, elaborate buttons, lace, silk, and more frequent changes of clothing. The poor wear coarser material and keep it going longer. But even modest clothing is not necessarily dull. Ordinary people have eyes. They also enjoy looking decent. Then there is imported cloth. This is where politics quietly enters your wardrobe. British manufactured textiles have long flowed into the colonies, while colonial households also produced significant amounts of homespun cloth. During the years of resistance to British taxation and trade policies, homespun becomes politically symbolic in some communities. Wearing locally produced cloth can signal virtue, economy, and resistance, which means even your jacket has somehow developed a political opinion. Eventually, after lacing, tying, fastening, buttoning, pulling, straightening, and adjusting, you are dressed. Your clothes are not especially light. They are not especially easy to wash. They have already belonged to somebody else or will eventually belong to somebody younger than you, and every single stitch represents time. You look down at yourself. Linen, wool, leather, hand sewing, repairs, possibly a patch from a garment that no longer exists. You are ready for the day. Just try not to tear anything. There is no replacement arriving tomorrow. 6. Your shoes are handmade, expensive, and losing an argument with the road. Then come the shoes, which, after all that effort getting dressed, are about to spend the rest of the day being punished by 18th century America. Shoes in 1776 are not disposable things you replace because the sole looks slightly tired. They are handmade. They are valuable. And if you own a good pair, you intend to keep them functioning for as long as leather, thread, nails, and human stubbornness will allow. A shoemaker begins with hides that have already passed through the lengthy and unpleasant business of tanning. Leather is cut according to patterns, shaped around a wooden form called a last, stitched, pegged, and assembled into something that hopefully resembles the human foot closely enough to prevent immediate regret. Everything is done by hand. There is no automated production line quietly producing 8,000 identical trainers while everyone sleeps. A shoemaker measures, cuts, stitches, hammers, trims, and charges accordingly. This means the shoes on your feet represent skilled labour and materials you cannot casually waste. If the sole wears thin, you do not throw the shoe away. You take it to be repaired. A new sole can be attached. A heel can be rebuilt. Loose stitching can be fixed. Leather can be patched. The objective is not to keep your footwear looking new. The objective is to prevent the ground from joining you inside it. And the ground is determined. If you live in a town such as Philadelphia or Boston, some streets are paved or improved, especially in busy areas, but many surfaces are still uneven, dirty, and heavily used by horses, carts, livestock, and people. If you live in the countryside, things become considerably more natural. And by natural we mean mud. Lots of mud. Rain turns roads into brown channels of soft earth where wagon wheels sink, horses struggle, and pedestrians begin making extremely tactical decisions about where to place each foot. Dry weather replaces the mud with dust. Winter contributes frozen ruts, ice, slush, and snow. Spring returns the mud because apparently nobody had suffered enough the first time. Your leather shoes are not waterproof in the modern sense. They can be treated with grease, wax, or other preparations to help resist moisture, but eventually water wins. Leather absorbs it. Stockings become damp. Cold begins working upward from your toes with tremendous enthusiasm. There is no heated car waiting 50 yards away. You are walking home in this. And stockings matter because 18th century footwear is often worn with woolen or linen stockings that reach toward or above the knee, depending on your clothing. If the stocking develops a hole, it gets darned. If the shoe develops a hole, it gets repaired. If both develop holes at the same time, congratulations. You now possess ventilation. Children create another problem. Children grow. Shoes do not. A family with several children can spend a painful amount of money keeping rapidly expanding feet covered, which is one reason going barefoot during warm weather is perfectly normal among poorer rural children and even some adults when circumstances allow. Why wear out valuable leather while the ground is warm enough to tolerate? The logic is excellent. The experience of meeting a sharp stone with an unprotected heel is less persuasive. Working people may own sturdier shoes designed more for durability than elegance. Wealthier colonists can afford fashionable footwear, finer leather, decorative buckles, and separate pairs for different occasions. Buckles themselves may be made from brass, silver, steel, or other materials, and an expensive pair can quietly announce that you are doing rather well. Your ordinary labouring shoe announces something simpler. You need to get through the day. There are boots as well, particularly for riding and certain kinds of outdoor work, but not everyone owns them. Good boots require even more leather and labour, and therefore even more money. So, you protect what you have. Wet footwear is dried carefully, not directly against fierce heat if you can avoid it, because leather can harden, shrink, crack, and transform an inconveniently damp shoe into an expensive wooden impression of one. Mud is scraped away. Leather is conditioned. Fastenings are checked. Repairs are made before small problems become large ones. You maintain your shoes for the same reason you maintain almost everything in the household. Replacement is costly, and tomorrow still exists. Finally, you step outside. The morning air is cold. The yard is wet. A chicken has already walked through something you would rather not identify. Your handmade leather shoes touch the ground. For several glorious seconds, your stockings remain dry. Then your heel sinks into the mud. The road has made its opening move. 7. Breakfast is porridge, bread, pork, and whatever yesterday has left negotiable. It's breakfast, and the good news is that you are going to eat. Probably. The less encouraging news is that nobody has opened a refrigerator, nobody has poured cereal from a cardboard box, and nobody has checked whether the milk is still within the date printed conveniently on the side. There is no date. There is barely a side. Food in 1776 is governed by season, region, wealth, storage, and whatever survived yesterday without developing a smell strong enough to begin negotiations. For an ordinary rural household, breakfast is practical rather than decorative. You are about to spend much of the day walking, lifting, carrying, digging, chopping, sewing, hauling, tending animals, or performing some other activity that would now earn you a fitness tracker notification and a recovery day. So you need calories. Porridge is an obvious candidate. Depending on where you live, this might be made from cornmeal, oats, or another grain available to the household. Cornmeal mush is especially common in many parts of colonial America. It is cheap, filling, simple to prepare, and remarkably resistant to becoming exciting. You boil water. You stir in meal. You keep stirring because lumps have apparently declared independence early. Perhaps you add milk. Perhaps butter. Perhaps molasses if your household has it and feels generous. Perhaps nothing. Breakfast has now been served. If some mush remains after the meal, it does not necessarily disappear. Leftovers can be cooled, sliced, and fried later, because food waste is not regarded as a charming personal flaw. Bread matters too. Wheat bread is desirable where wheat is readily available and affordable, but rye, corn, and mixed grain breads appear widely depending on region. In New England, combinations of rye and cornmeal are common. Farther south, corn becomes increasingly important. Making bread is not the 5-minute preparation stage modern recipes politely imply. Grain must be grown, harvested, threshed, winnowed, taken to a mill or ground somehow. Then flour or meal must be stored safely from dampness, insects, rodents, and every mouse in the county who has apparently read your inventory. A household fortunate enough to have bread puts it to work. Fresh bread is eaten. Older bread is toasted, soaked, fried, added to other dishes, or otherwise persuaded to continue contributing. Then there is pork. Pigs are enormously useful animals in colonial America because they are efficient, adaptable, and capable of transforming things humans do not want to eat into something humans very much do. Salt pork, bacon, ham, or other preserved pork may appear at breakfast, particularly in households that have the means to keep it. Fresh meat cannot simply sit around waiting for inspiration. Without refrigeration, preservation is essential. Meat is salted, smoked, dried, pickled, stored in cool spaces where possible, and inspected using the sophisticated 18th century food safety instrument known as your nose. You smell it, you look at it, you consider how much work went into producing it. Your standards become remarkably flexible. Eggs may appear when hens are laying. Milk may come directly from the household cow. Butter and cheese extend the usefulness of dairy, assuming somebody has already completed the extremely small task of milking the animal, straining the milk, churning the cream, washing the butter, salting it, and storing it. By small, of course, we mean an entire sequence of labour before you have fully opened your eyes. And then there are the drinks. Cider is widely consumed in many regions. Small beer and other weak fermented drinks remain common in some communities. Milk is ordinary where available. Water is certainly drunk, despite the exaggerated modern claim that people avoided it entirely, but its quality depends very much on the source. Tea is available, though by 1776 it comes with political baggage heavy enough to require its own wagon. Coffee is increasingly familiar. Chocolate exists too, though it is more expensive and less likely to be sitting casually beside the porridge in an ordinary household. If your family is prosperous, breakfast can be much richer. More meat, better bread, imported tea or coffee, perhaps preserves, butter, eggs, and other luxuries in greater quantity. If your family is poor, the meal contracts. Cornmeal, bread, perhaps milk, perhaps scraps from yesterday, perhaps not enough. The revolution does not suspend hunger. In fact, war makes supply more uncertain. Armies require food, trade is disrupted, prices fluctuate. Shortages develop unevenly from place to place. Politics may be happening in Philadelphia, but your breakfast still depends on weather, harvests, markets, animals, and whether somebody remembered to cover the flour barrel. You finish the last spoonful. The bowl is scraped clean. Nothing is thrown away. You are fed. You are warm enough. And for perhaps 30 peaceful seconds, you can simply sit beside the hearth. Then someone mentions that the water bucket is empty. Breakfast is over. 8. Every bucket of water has personally travelled to meet you. Before you become too comfortable, let's talk about water. Because in 1776, water does not arrive invisibly through pipes buried beneath the street, under pressure, purified, heated, and waiting obediently behind a chrome tap. It has to be found, then fetched, then carried, every single time. If you live on a farm, your household water may come from a well in the yard, a spring nearby, a stream, or another local source considered dependable enough to use. In a town, you might rely on a public pump or shared well, which means the morning water trip also comes with the bonus possibility of hearing 3 pieces of neighbourhood gossip before breakfast has fully settled. But wherever the water comes from, one fact remains constant. It is heavy. A gallon of water weighs more than 8 pounds. A wooden bucket filled generously enough to justify the journey becomes a very effective reminder that gravity has been working against civilization from the beginning. You carry one bucket, then another. And because a household does not merely drink water, the job keeps expanding. Water is needed for cooking, for washing faces and hands, for laundry, for cleaning floors and utensils, for brewing, for animals, for soaking food, for preparing medicines, for extinguishing the occasional spark that has developed ambitions beyond the hearth. And if someone in the family decides today would be a good day for a full bath, you may briefly consider moving out. That water must be carried too, bucket by bucket, then heated, then carried again. The person doing much of this work is often a woman, child, servant, hired labourer, or enslaved person, depending on the household. This matters because the convenience enjoyed by wealthier families does not mean the labour has vanished. It means someone else is performing it. A prosperous household may appear to have effortless access to clean water. What it actually has is more people carrying buckets. The distinction is substantial, and the route itself may not be pleasant. In winter, the ground is frozen or slick. The bucket handle bites into cold fingers. Water sloshes over the rim and freezes against clothing. In summer, the walk is easier, but the source may be lower, muddier, warmer, or more vulnerable to contamination. You learn quickly not to fill the bucket all the way to the top unless you enjoy arriving home wearing part of it. Balance becomes a skill. You hold one bucket carefully. Perhaps use a yoke across the shoulders if available. You walk steadily because every stumble converts several minutes of labour into a damp patch on the road. And water quality is another matter entirely. People in 1776 understand perfectly well that some water tastes bad, smells bad, or makes people sick more often than other water. What they do not have is germ theory. They cannot see bacteria. They do not understand exactly why a clean-looking well can still be dangerous. A privy position too close to a water source is therefore not merely unpleasant architecture. It is a future medical problem nobody can identify properly. Streams may receive waste upstream. Animals stand near wells. Surface runoff carries whatever the ground has collected. Town water sources can become especially vulnerable as population increases, and people, livestock, rubbish, drains, and wells are all asked to coexist within the same few streets. And yet water is still drunk. Despite the popular modern myth, colonists do not spend their entire lives avoiding water and replacing it with alcohol. They drink water when good sources are available. They also drink cider, beer, milk, tea, coffee, and other beverages, because habits, availability, safety, cost, and culture all vary enormously. But water remains essential regardless. You cannot make porridge without it. You cannot wash linen without it. You cannot keep animals alive without it. You cannot run a household without somebody repeatedly lifting it out of the earth and carrying it where it needs to go, which changes the way you think about waste. You do not leave water running while brushing your teeth because first, there is no running water, and second, whoever carried it would probably come back and have a very reasonable conversation with you. A basin is filled only as much as necessary. Cooking water may be reused when practical. Laundry becomes a planned operation rather than an impulsive activity triggered by discovering one shirt smells questionable. Large wash days require serious preparation. Water has to be brought in quantity. Fuel must heat it. Soap must be available. Clothes must be scrubbed, rinsed, wrung, and dried. Nothing about this involves pressing delicates. By late morning, you have already carried enough water to become intimately familiar with the distance between the house and the well. Your shoulders know it. Your hands know it. Your lower back has written a strongly worded letter about it. You place the final bucket beside the hearth and watch the surface settle. For a moment, it looks wonderfully ordinary, clear, still, effortless, which is almost insulting, because that bucket did not simply appear. It travelled, and in 1776, so does every drop. 9. The bathroom is outside, unless the weather has successfully changed your mind. Now for sanitation. Because sooner or later, even in the middle of a revolution, the human body insists on conducting its own domestic affairs. And in 1776, this means confronting a simple fact. The bathroom is probably outside. If you live in a rural household, your main facility is likely a privy, sometimes called a necessary house. This is a small wooden structure positioned a sensible distance from the main home, usually over a pit dug into the ground. There is a seat, there is a hole, there is very little else. Nobody has installed heated tiles. There is no scented hand wash. There is certainly no magazine rack unless someone has made a series of extremely unusual 18th century priorities. During a warm summer afternoon, the arrangement is manageable. You walk outside, cross the yard, open the door, try not to investigate the corners too carefully, sit down, complete the necessary business, return to civilization. In January, the entire experience becomes something else. You wake in the middle of the night. The room is freezing. Outside, the wind is moving across the yard with the focused determination of something that has recently discovered your address. You consider the privy. The privy is 40 feet away. 40 feet has never sounded so far. Fortunately, there is another option. The chamber pot. This is exactly what it sounds like. A ceramic pewter or other suitable vessel kept indoors, often beneath the bed or somewhere discreet enough that everyone can pretend it is not there despite absolutely everyone knowing it is there. You use it during the night, then somebody empties it in the morning. The important word is somebody, because nothing in 1776 disappears by itself. Waste does not travel through pipes. There is no flush. No hidden network carries the consequences of your evening away to a treatment plant several miles beyond town. You create the problem. Someone physically moves the problem. In an ordinary family, that duty might fall to whoever happens to be dealing with morning household work. In wealthier homes, servants perform it. In slaveholding households, enslaved people may be forced to perform it. Once again, comfort higher up the social ladder often means unpleasant labour has simply been transferred downward. Privies themselves require maintenance. The pit eventually fills. Then it must be covered, emptied, relocated, or otherwise managed according to local circumstances. Ashes, earth, or other material may be thrown in to reduce smell and nuisance. And there is smell. Of course there is smell. Summer does not improve the situation. Warm weather encourages flies, accelerates decomposition, and transforms the small wooden building at the edge of the yard into a place nobody enters for reflective leisure. In towns, things become more complicated. More people means more waste, more horses, more livestock, more rubbish, more kitchens, more workshops, more drains, and all of these things are occupying streets that were not designed by anyone who had recently attended a modern municipal planning meeting. Household refuse may end up in yards, gutters, pits, or designated dumping areas depending on local rules and habits. Town governments do attempt to regulate nuisances, street cleanliness, and waste disposal, particularly in larger communities, but enforcement and infrastructure vary. Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and other growing towns have wells and pumps serving populations that are becoming increasingly dense. And this introduces an uncomfortable relationship between two things you would ideally keep very far apart: drinking water and human waste. People understand that foul water is undesirable. They can smell contamination. They know some wells are better than others. What they do not understand is the microbial mechanism connecting invisible contamination with disease. Germ theory is still generations away. So a well may look perfectly clean. The water may taste acceptable, and somewhere beneath the ground, a nearby privy pit may be contributing something nobody requested. Hand hygiene is similarly limited by knowledge and logistics. People wash their hands, particularly when visibly dirty, and soap exists. But nobody knows that microscopic organisms are moving between waste, food, water, hands, cooking equipment, and mouths. You finish at the privy. You wipe using whatever material is locally available and practical, which may include cloth scraps, leaves, paper when it can be spared, or other humble solutions. Then you return to the house. Perhaps wash your hands. Perhaps not as thoroughly as a modern infection control nurse would prefer. And then, with complete confidence, you help prepare breakfast. This is not because people are foolish. They simply cannot defend themselves against knowledge humanity has not discovered yet. By now you have survived the cold seat, the smell, the flies, the chamber pot, and the deeply unsettling geography of the household well. You begin walking back toward the hearth. Your dignity has survived, mostly. And somewhere behind you stands a tiny wooden building that has already convinced you of one thing. Indoor plumbing may eventually be humanity's greatest achievement. 10. Most of your day is farm work because food has not yet learned to deliver itself. For much of the population, the rest of the day now belongs to the land, and the land has a schedule. It does not care that you slept badly. It does not care that your shoes are wet. It does not care that Congress is debating the future of the continent, or that somebody in Philadelphia has recently written something very forceful about liberty. The corn needs tending. The fence is broken. The cow needs milking. And one of the pigs has somehow escaped again. Welcome to agriculture in 1776. Most people in the 13 colonies live in rural communities, and farming is central to everyday life. Even households that are not purely agricultural often keep gardens, poultry, pigs, cows, or other animals because food production happens close to home. Your farm may grow different crops depending on where you live. In New England, rocky soil and shorter growing seasons encourage mixed farming. Livestock, hay, corn, rye, vegetables, and orchards. Farther south, longer growing seasons support crops such as tobacco, rice, indigo, wheat, and corn, though the labour systems behind those crops vary dramatically, especially where enslaved people are forced to produce wealth for plantation owners. For an ordinary small farmer, however, the day is usually a collection of jobs rather than one heroic agricultural task. You feed animals, check fences, carry fodder, clear stones, repair tools, cut wood, pull weeds, move manure, dig drainage, mend harness, and periodically stand in the middle of a field wondering how the animal you secured 15 minutes ago is now standing on the wrong side of the gate. Farming is intensely seasonal. Spring means planting and preparation. Summer brings weeding, haymaking, livestock care, and constant anxiety about weather. Autumn becomes harvest, preservation, slaughtering, threshing, storing, and preparing for winter. Winter reduces some field work but replaces it with wood cutting, repairs, animal care, spinning, tool maintenance, and the annual discovery that cold can enter a building through gaps you are certain did not exist yesterday. There is always something, and almost everything requires muscle. Ploughing is done with animal power where possible. Oxen and horses pull ploughs through soil that may contain roots, rocks, and an apparently personal dislike of straight lines. You guide the plough. The animal pulls. The blade cuts. If you hit a stone, the handles remind your shoulders immediately. There is no padded tractor seat, no climate-controlled cab, no radio playing gently while satellite navigation keeps the rows straight. Your navigation system is eyesight and experience. Your suspension is your knees. Harvest time is even more demanding. Grain is cut with sickles or scythes, then gathered, bound, moved, threshed to separate grain from stalk, winnowed to separate grain from chaff. Stored carefully enough that moisture and rodents do not undo several months of labour during one particularly enthusiastic week. Corn must be husked and dried, Fruit may be gathered and preserved. Hay must be cut, dried, turned, gathered, and stored without rain ruining the entire operation. Weather controls everything. A week of rain at the wrong moment can destroy hay. A late frost can damage crops. Drought can reduce harvests. Storms flatten grain. There is no agricultural weather app informing you that precipitation will begin at 3:17. You look at the sky. You smell the air. You watch clouds. You listen to neighbours. Then everyone agrees it probably will not rain. It rains. Animals provide their own continuing workload. Cows need milking on schedule because cows have little interest in national emergencies. Horses need feeding, grooming, watering, and shoeing. Pigs require surprisingly little encouragement to survive, but enormous supervision, if you prefer them not to investigate the vegetable garden. Chickens wander around producing eggs, noise, and a constant impression that they have misplaced something important. Then there are fences. Wooden fences consume tremendous quantities of labour, especially where split rails are used. Trees must be felled, logs split, rails carried, posts arranged, sections repaired. The fence exists because livestock have dedicated their lives to proving it does not. By midday, your hands are dirty, your shoulders ache, sweat has soaked through the linen shirt you carefully put on that morning. Your shoes have collected mud from several different fields. You have already lifted, dragged, carried, chopped, pushed, pulled, and repaired more things than a modern gym membership would reasonably ask of you in a week. And the astonishing part is that nobody calls this exercise. It is just Tuesday. You stop briefly to eat. Then you look across the field. There is still work waiting. Of course there is. Food has not learned to deliver itself yet. 11. Women's work begins before breakfast and ends, shortly after everything else. If you're a woman in an ordinary household, your day has already been underway for quite some time, possibly before anyone else has had the confidence to call it morning, because in 1776 the household is not merely where you live. It is where food is produced, clothing is maintained, children are raised, animals are managed, goods are stored, illnesses are treated, and an astonishing quantity of repetitive labour quietly prevents everybody from descending into chaos, and a very large share of that labour belongs to women. You begin with the fire, or the water, or the children, or the cow. The exact order depends on which one is making the most urgent noise. Perhaps you rake yesterday's ashes aside and coax the hearth back to life. Perhaps you carry water from the well. Perhaps you prepare breakfast while a toddler clings to your skirt and another child announces that something has happened involving a chicken. Nobody has invented the phrase mental load yet. This does not mean it is absent. Once breakfast is finished, the kitchen does not simply close. There are bowls to clean, food to store, milk to deal with before warmth spoils it, bread to prepare, vegetables to wash, meat to salt or cook. The fire must be maintained while using no more wood than necessary, because every piece of fuel required somebody to cut, split, stack, and carry it. If the household keeps a cow, milk may need to be turned into butter or cheese. Butter begins with cream. Cream becomes butter only after churning, and churning is one of those historical activities that looks charming for approximately 30 seconds in a museum demonstration. Then you continue doing it, and continue, until the cream finally separates, and you are left with butter, buttermilk, and a right arm that has developed political grievances of its own. The butter then needs working, washing, perhaps salting, and storing. The cheese requires an entirely different sequence of heating, curdling, draining, pressing, and waiting. The cow provided the raw material. Everything after that is administration. Then there is clothing. Every person in the household is wearing fabric that eventually tears, stains, stretches, loses buttons, wears thin at the elbows, or develops holes in places nobody noticed until the garment was already being worn in public. So you sew, patch, darn stockings, turn collars, repair seams, alter garments for growing children, reuse cloth from things that can no longer reasonably continue as themselves. A worn adult garment may become children's clothing. After that, scraps become patches. After that, perhaps cleaning cloths. Textile retirement is gradual. Nothing is allowed to simply resign. If your household produces some of its own cloth, the labour grows dramatically. Flax must be processed into linen fibre. Wool has to be cleaned and carded. Then comes spinning. Hours of spinning. A spinning wheel can turn prepared fibre into thread far more efficiently than a hand spindle, but efficiently is a relative term when nearly every yard of cloth begins with someone feeding fibre through their fingers for hours. Then the thread must become fabric. Then the fabric must become clothing. A modern shirt appears in your home after a delivery van stops outside. Your shirt in 1776 may represent an agricultural project. Laundry is no easier. Wash day is not something you casually fit between errands. It can consume much of a day. Water must be hauled, large quantities of it. Some must be heated over the fire. Soap may be homemade from grease or fat combined with lye derived from wood ashes. Clothing and household linen are soaked, scrubbed, beaten, boiled in some methods, rinsed, wrung, and hung or spread to dry. Your hands remain wet. Your back remains bent. And the 18th century has not yet developed a gentle cycle. Women also tend kitchen gardens, poultry, dairies, and smaller livestock. They preserve food when harvests arrive. They make candles, brew or help brew beer and cider in some households, produce soap, prepare medicines and home remedies, care for anyone who becomes ill, assist neighbours during births, look after elderly relatives, supervise children while completing all the other tasks children make significantly harder. And during busy agricultural seasons, women frequently work in fields as well. Planting, haymaking, harvesting, gathering crops, and processing food do not become exclusively male responsibilities merely because the kitchen remains busy. The work changes with class. A prosperous merchant's wife in Philadelphia may not personally haul every bucket or scrub every garment. She may manage servants. A wealthy plantation mistress may direct a large household while much of the brutal physical labour is forced onto enslaved women. That distinction matters. When an 18th century household appears comfortable, somebody is still doing the work. Comfort does not remove labour. It redistributes it. By late afternoon, you have cooked, cleaned, carried, mended, supervised, preserved, organised, remembered, and produced. Nobody has clocked these hours. Nobody has described most of this as employment. It is simply what keeps the household alive. Evening arrives. Supper still needs making. Children still need managing. Clothes can still be repaired beside the fire. Tomorrow's food may need preparation. You finally sit down, for perhaps 4 minutes. Then somebody asks where their stockings are. You know exactly where they are. Of course you do. You made them. 12. Childhood ends around the time you become useful. Now let's look at the children, because they are everywhere. They're in the house, in the yard, beside the hearth, in the fields, carrying buckets, watching younger siblings, chasing chickens away from places chickens have absolutely no business being. And unlike the carefully scheduled childhood of the modern world, complete with school hours, organised sports, screen limits, birthday parties, and adults debating whether 7:30 is too late for bedtime, childhood in 1776 is considerably less protected from the ordinary business of survival. Children play, certainly. They laugh. They invent games. They fight with siblings. They make dolls from cloth, wood, corn husks, or whatever materials are available. They roll hoops, spin tops, play with marbles, throw balls, climb things they have specifically been told not to climb. Human childhood has not fundamentally changed. Give a child a beautifully made toy and a stick, and there is still a reasonable chance the stick will win. But play exists alongside work, and the transition begins early. As soon as you can carry something without immediately dropping it, somebody notices. Excellent. You are now economically relevant. A small child might gather eggs, carry kindling, fetch small amounts of water, scatter feed for chickens, pick vegetables, collect berries, help watch a baby while an adult works nearby. None of these tasks sounds particularly severe on its own. The important thing is that they are part of the expectation. You belong to the household. The household works. Therefore, eventually, so do you. As you grow older, the jobs grow with you. Boys on farms may learn to tend livestock, weed fields, help with planting and harvest, split smaller pieces of wood, maintain fences, guide animals, or assist their fathers and older brothers with agricultural work. Girls may learn spinning, sewing, cooking, dairying, gardening, food preservation, laundry, poultry keeping, and childcare alongside mothers, sisters, relatives, servants, or enslaved women, depending on the household. These divisions are real, but necessity is flexible. Harvest does not pause because a task belongs theoretically to somebody else. If grain needs gathering, people gather grain. If the cow has escaped, gender expectations may briefly wait until the cow is back. And then there is schooling. Education in 1776 varies enormously. If you live in New England, formal schooling may be relatively accessible in some communities because local traditions have long emphasized literacy, especially for reading scripture. A small town may maintain a schoolmaster. You might attend a one-room school with children of different ages learning together. The room is plain. The benches are hard. The teacher has very little interest in your preferred learning style. Reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, and religious instruction dominate where schooling is available. Books are valuable. Paper is valuable. Ink requires care. Nobody hands you a fresh notebook because you wrote your name badly on the first page, and attendance may be seasonal. Farm children are needed at home during busy periods. School is useful. The harvest is urgent. The corn has once again defeated education. Girls may receive less formal schooling than boys in many places, although literacy among women is far from unusual, especially in communities where reading religious material and managing household affairs are important. Education for black children is restricted dramatically by slavery and local custom, although circumstances vary by colony and status. Enslaved children may receive little or no formal instruction and are introduced instead to labor within the system that controls them. Indigenous children are educated within their own communities through entirely different traditions, learning languages, histories, skills, ecological knowledge, spiritual practices, farming, hunting, diplomacy, craft, and the responsibilities required by their particular nation and family. There is no single colonial childhood. There are many. Class matters too. The child of a wealthy merchant or planter might receive private tutoring. Boys from prosperous families might study Latin and Greek before moving toward college, law, medicine, commerce, or another profession. Girls in elite households may learn reading, writing, music, sewing, household management, dancing, and the social accomplishments considered appropriate to their future position. Meanwhile, an apprentice in a town may enter another household while still young, bound to a master for years to learn a trade. You learn shoemaking by making shoes, printing by working in a print shop, coopering by making barrels, and sweeping the floor by discovering that apparently every profession begins with sweeping the floor. By adolescence, expectations become increasingly adult. You may already be doing work essential to the family economy. You understand animals, tools, weather, food, fire. You can perhaps prepare a meal, mend clothing, handle a horse, milk a cow, split wood, care for younger children, or perform a skilled trade. Nobody has described you as independent. You are simply useful, and useful is important. Toward evening, you see a younger child carrying a small bundle of kindling toward the house. They are walking carefully, very seriously, trying not to drop it. Yesterday, perhaps, they were mostly playing. Today, someone realized they could carry wood. Congratulations. Their career has begun. 13. For hundreds of thousands of people, ordinary life means being enslaved. And now we reach something no honest account of 1776 America can treat as background scenery. Because while colonists are speaking increasingly loudly about liberty, natural rights, arbitrary power, and the intolerable injustice of being ruled without consent, hundreds of thousands of black men, women, and children are living in slavery within those same colonies. The contradiction is enormous, and people at the time can see it. Some comment on it directly. Others perform the considerably more convenient intellectual exercise of not looking at it too closely. If you are enslaved in 1776, your ordinary life depends heavily on where you live, who claims ownership over you, what work you are forced to perform, your age, your sex, your skills, and the particular labor system surrounding you. There is no single experience of slavery, but the foundation is always the same. You are legally treated as property. Your labor is controlled by someone else. Your movement can be restricted. Your family can be separated. Your future can be sold. And almost every ordinary decision modern people consider personal exists beneath someone else's power. In the Chesapeake, especially Virginia and Maryland, tobacco has shaped slavery for generations. although many plantations are also producing wheat, corn, livestock, and other crops. Farther south, particularly in South Carolina and Georgia, rice and indigo cultivation depend heavily on enslaved labor. Rice work can be exceptionally demanding. Fields require complex systems of irrigation, drainage, embankments, and water control, often in hot, mosquito-heavy environments where disease is a constant danger. In many places, enslaved Africans bring agricultural knowledge that plantation owners themselves do not possess. Their expertise helps create enormous wealth. They do not receive that wealth. On smaller farms, the arrangement may look different but remains slavery. You may work beside the person who owns you. You might plough fields, tend livestock, cut timber, repair fences, plant corn, harvest wheat, or perform almost any other agricultural task. In towns and ports, enslaved people work as carpenters, blacksmiths, coopers, sailors, dock workers, coachmen, cooks, laundresses, domestic servants, and skilled artisans. Some are hired out by enslavers who collect the wages produced by their labor. So you may possess a trade. You may handle money. You may negotiate with customers. You may move through a busy town performing skilled work, and legally somebody else still claims ownership of you. The household can be just as demanding. Enslaved women frequently cook, wash clothing, clean rooms, carry water, tend fires, care for children, sew, preserve food, garden, nurse the sick, and perform agricultural labor as well. The same work we have already described as exhausting for free women does not somehow become easier when performed without freedom. It simply acquires coercion. Children are drawn into the system early. They may begin with small tasks around houses, yards, workshops, or fields before moving into heavier labor as they grow. And for enslaved parents, childhood carries another fear beyond work: sale. Family relationships exist with enormous strength despite a legal system that provides very little protection for them. Marriage between enslaved people may be recognized within the community and sometimes encouraged by enslavers, but it does not necessarily carry the same legal security as marriages among free people. A husband can be sold away. A wife can be sold away. Children can be sold away from parents. An ordinary morning can contain the possibility that somebody you love will simply be removed. And yet enslaved people build lives within these brutal constraints. Families form. Children are raised. Food is cooked. Gardens are tended where circumstances permit. Songs, stories, religious traditions, languages, memories, craftsmanship, and cultural practices survive and change. People create community because human beings do not stop being human simply because a legal system insists on treating them as property. Resistance also takes many forms. Some people escape. Some slow work, break tools, feign illness, steal time, preserve forbidden relationships, negotiate for small freedoms, pass information, help others flee. Occasionally resistance becomes open rebellion, although the punishment for suspected revolt can be terrifying. For many, simply maintaining family, identity, and some control over small portions of daily life becomes its own form of resistance. And then there is the revolution. The language surrounding it is impossible to ignore. Liberty, freedom, tyranny, the rights of mankind. These words circulate through newspapers, sermons, conversations, military camps, taverns, and public declarations. Enslaved people hear them too. Some seize the opportunity created by war. British officials at various points offer freedom to enslaved people belonging to rebels who escape and serve the crown, drawing thousands toward British lines during the conflict. Patriot forces also eventually include black soldiers, free and enslaved, under varying policies and circumstances. For an enslaved person, the revolution is therefore not necessarily a simple choice between Britain and American independence. The more urgent question may be much more personal. Which side offers the best chance of becoming free? By the end of the day, you have worked in a field, kitchen, stable, workshop, dockyard, or household. Perhaps you have produced tobacco that will be sold abroad. Perhaps rice, perhaps wheat, perhaps furniture, perhaps another family's supper. Your labour supports the society now arguing about the meaning of liberty. You hear the word everywhere. It sounds magnificent. It is simply not being applied to you. 14. Native nations are not waiting quietly beyond someone else's frontier. Move beyond the settled towns and farms and another misleading picture disappears. Because what colonial settlers call the frontier is not empty land, waiting patiently for someone to arrive with an axe and a property claim. People already live there. Communities already exist. Fields are planted. Hunting grounds are known. Rivers have names. Trade routes cross forests long before colonial surveyors begin drawing straight lines across maps and announcing that everything has become considerably more organized. In 1776, indigenous nations across eastern North America are politically sophisticated, economically connected, and deeply aware of what the colonial rebellion may mean for them. And what it may mean is not necessarily good. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, sometimes called the Iroquois Confederacy by Europeans, includes powerful nations such as the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. Farther south are Cherokee communities. Elsewhere are Shawnee, Delaware, Creek, Catawba, and many other peoples, each with their own governments, alliances, languages, territories, rivalries, and histories. There is no single Native American position on the revolution. That would be rather like asking Europe to agree unanimously on anything. Different nations make different calculations. Even individual communities within the same wider confederacy may disagree. Some lean toward the British. Some support the American rebels. Some attempt neutrality. Some change strategy as the war develops. The central question is often brutally practical. Which side is less likely to take our land? Unfortunately, both sides have a record that inspires limited confidence. For decades, colonial settlement has pushed steadily westward. Families move beyond earlier boundaries. Land companies make claims. Surveyors arrive. Speculators purchase enormous tracts on paper. Settlers build cabins in places imperial officials had sometimes tried to reserve for indigenous peoples. The British Crown's proclamation of 1763 attempted to limit settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains after the 7 Years' War. Colonists responded with the 18th century version of reading the terms and immediately looking for the section explaining what happens if they ignore them. Many simply crossed anyway. So when rebellion begins, native leaders do not merely hear abstract arguments about liberty and representation. They see an opportunity and a danger. British officials may appear more willing, at least in some circumstances, to restrict colonial expansion westward. American revolutionaries, meanwhile, include many people deeply interested in Western land. That does not make British policy benevolent. It makes the strategic calculation complicated. War also disrupts everyday life. Trade becomes less reliable. Communities near contested regions face raids, military movements, destroyed crops, livestock losses, abandoned towns, and sudden demands to choose sides. A village that wishes to remain neutral may discover that neutrality is respected by absolutely nobody carrying a musket. If warriors join one side, enemies may retaliate against the entire settlement. If leaders refuse to join, allies may accuse them of betrayal. Diplomacy becomes a survival skill, and indigenous diplomacy is highly developed. Councils matter. Speeches matter. Gift exchange matters. Kinship relationships matter. Messengers travel between communities carrying information and proposals. Decisions may take time because consensus is important in many political traditions. European officials sometimes find this frustrating because they would prefer to locate one man, call him chief, have him sign something, and return home with the satisfying belief that several thousand people have now agreed. Reality is less cooperative. Daily life continues beneath all this politics. People grow corn, beans, squash, and other crops according to region and tradition. Women in many Eastern indigenous societies play central roles in agriculture and household economies. Men may hunt, trade, fight, conduct diplomacy, or undertake other work depending on community and season. Children learn languages, stories, practical skills, spiritual traditions, family responsibilities, and the geography of a landscape known through generations of use. This is not wilderness to them. It is home. Forests contain paths. Rivers connect settlements. Seasonal movements follow established patterns. A place that looks empty to a newcomer may contain hunting territory, burial grounds, planting sites, sacred places, diplomatic routes, and memories extending farther back than any colonial deed. Then somebody arrives with a survey chain, and suddenly the land has corners. By 1776, many native communities have also been trading with Europeans for generations. Metal tools, firearms, cloth, kettles, glass beads, and other imported goods have become integrated into local economies. That creates dependence on trade networks which war now threatens to interrupt. A musket is useful. A musket without powder is a strangely shaped club, so alliances can involve access to supplies as much as ideology. And while colonists are declaring that government requires the consent of the governed, indigenous nations are watching settlers claim enormous territories without asking the people already governing themselves there. The irony is difficult to miss. You stand on a path beyond the farms, looking toward forests colonial maps have begun colouring as though colouring something constitutes ownership. Somewhere ahead is a town, not an outpost, not a temporary camp, a town. Families live there. Political decisions are made there. People know exactly who they are. The frontier exists mainly from the perspective of whoever has just arrived. From the other direction, it is simply somebody's neighbourhood, and the neighbours have noticed you. 15. In town, everyone seems to be making, selling, carrying, or repairing something. Leave the farm and enter Philadelphia, and the first thing you notice is noise. Not modern city noise. No engines, no sirens, no buses grinding away at traffic lights. Instead, you hear iron striking iron from a blacksmith shop, wood being sawn, barrels being hammered together, cartwheels rattling over uneven streets, horses snorting, shop doors opening, dock workers shouting, church bells marking the hour, and somewhere nearby, a printer is producing several hundred copies of somebody's extremely strong opinion about Parliament. Welcome to an American town in 1776. Philadelphia is the largest city in the colonies and one of the busiest ports in British North America. Boston, New York, Charleston, Newport, Baltimore, and other towns have their own commercial worlds, but even smaller communities contain an impressive concentration of skilled work. Everything is being made, because almost everything has to be. Walk down one street and you may pass a carpenter shaping furniture or building components. Nearby, a joiner works finer pieces of wood. A cabinet maker produces expensive household furniture for customers who have reached the fortunate stage of life where owning a decorative chest has become a concern. A blacksmith is hammering iron into hinges, nails, tools, fittings, horseshoes, and whatever else the neighbourhood has managed to bend or break this week. The forge is hot. The shop smells of coal or charcoal, scorched metal, sweat, leather, and horses. Sparks jump from the anvil. You stand slightly farther away. This seems wise. Then you find the shoemaker. He works leather over wooden lasts, cutting, stitching, pegging, trimming, and repairing footwear one pair at a time. Next comes the tailor, sitting cross-legged at his workbench or table, stitching coats, waistcoats, breeches, and other garments for customers who expect clothing to fit because adjustable elastic has not yet arrived to forgive anyone. Nearby, a cooper shapes wooden staves into barrels. This is more important than it sounds. Barrels are everywhere. Flour travels in barrels. Fish travels in barrels. Meat is salted in barrels. Beer, cider, rum, molasses, grain, and countless other commodities are stored and shipped in barrels. The 18th century economy is quietly resting inside wooden cylinders. If the cooper stops working, several industries begin having a very bad afternoon. Then there are bakers, tanners, saddlers, wheelwrights, silversmiths, gunsmiths, rope makers, chandlers making or selling candles, printers setting tiny pieces of metal type one character at a time. Each shop has its own smell, sound, tools, and rhythm, and many are attached directly to homes. The distinction between workplace and private residence is surprisingly thin. A shop may occupy the front room. The family lives behind it or upstairs. Children move between domestic and commercial spaces. Apprentices may sleep in the household. Customers arrive beneath the same roof where supper will later be eaten. Your work-life balance consists mainly of a staircase. Apprentices are everywhere. A young person bound to a master may spend several years learning a trade in exchange for training, food, lodging, and sometimes clothing. The arrangement is practical. It is also intense. Your master teaches you, employs you, supervises you, may house you, and can usually find you whenever another floor requires sweeping. You begin with simple jobs, carry materials, clean tools, run errands, hold things, watch, repeat, get corrected, repeat again. Eventually, if all goes well, you become genuinely skilled. There is no online tutorial called Become a Cooper in 10 minutes. The barrel will simply leak until you learn. The streets outside are just as busy. Market days bring farmers into town carrying produce, meat, eggs, butter, grain, poultry, and other goods. Merchants sell imported cloth, tea, coffee, sugar, hardware, ceramics, spices, books, and luxury items for customers who can afford them. Sailors and dock workers move cargo between ships, warehouses, wagons, and counting houses. Port towns smell of salt water, tar, fish, rope, horses, wood smoke, human sweat, and trade. The waterfront is particularly chaotic. Ships unload crates and barrels. Ropes groan. Carts wait. Men shout instructions. Sailors disappear into taverns with wages that may survive the evening if handled very carefully. And hovering over all of this is politics. Printers produce newspapers, pamphlets, proclamations, handbills, and official notices. People stop outside shops to discuss the latest report. A merchant worries about disrupted imports. A craftsman wonders whether military orders might mean more business. A sailor has heard that British ships are approaching. A customer claims independence is inevitable. Another thinks the entire rebellion is madness. The man behind the counter would mainly like both of them to pay what they owe. By late afternoon, the streets are still full of movement. Nothing appears finished. A wagon needs a wheel repaired. A horse needs shoeing. A customer wants a coat altered. A ship has arrived. Another is preparing to leave. Someone is carrying flour. Someone is carrying timber. Someone is carrying news. You stop in the middle of it all and realize that an 18th century town is not merely a place where people live. It is a machine powered almost entirely by hands, and every hand seems to have a job. 16. Money exists, but credit and I'll settle with you later are doing serious work. Let's talk about buying things. Because the economy of 1776 America has decided that simply handing over one standard national currency would be far too straightforward. There is money. Of course there is. But there are also different colonial currencies, British accounting units, foreign coins, paper notes, commodity exchange, personal credit, merchant accounts, and the ancient financial instrument known as, you know I'm good for it. You walk into a shop expecting to buy flour. You may leave having completed a transaction involving 3 currencies, a written account, and a promise involving next month's pork. British pounds, shillings, and pence still provide a familiar language for pricing and accounting, but the actual coins in circulation can come from several places. Spanish silver dollars are particularly important. These coins circulate widely throughout the Atlantic world and are accepted in the colonies because silver has the useful quality of being recognizably valuable even when governments are arguing about everything else. Other foreign coins circulate too. Money travels with trade, which means your pocket may contain a small international conference. The problem is that hard currency is often scarce. Coins leave the colonies to pay for imported goods. Trade creates constant demand for specie, meaning gold or silver coin. Colonial governments have responded over the years by issuing paper currency in various forms, but values and rules differ from place to place. A pound in one colony does not necessarily possess exactly the same value as a pound somewhere else. This creates the sort of arithmetic that makes buying a horse feel like an entrance examination. Then the revolution begins. Now Congress needs money. A great deal of money. Armies are expensive even when the soldiers themselves are frequently waiting for their wages. So the Continental Congress begins issuing paper continental currency. At first, these notes provide an essential way to finance the war. The assumption is that future revenues will support their value. This is a perfectly reasonable idea provided the future behaves itself. The future does not. More notes are printed. Confidence weakens. Counterfeiting becomes a problem. British efforts deliberately encourage that problem, and over the following years, continental currency depreciates dramatically. In 1776, however, the full disaster is still developing. The money has begun its exciting new career as a warning to future economics students. For ordinary people, credit remains crucial. You walk into a merchant's shop, take what you need. The merchant writes the amount into an account book. Perhaps you pay part now, perhaps after harvest, perhaps when somebody else pays you. Perhaps you settle the account using produce, labour, or another arrangement. The merchant knows you. You know the merchant. Everyone knows approximately what everyone else owns. Modern credit scoring has not been invented because the village already knows your entire family. Your financial history is stored in human memory. This has advantages. A trusted customer can obtain necessities even when coin is short. It also means that failing to pay does not result merely in an automated email. You will see the creditor at church, and probably at the tavern, and perhaps at dinner. There are few places to hide from a debt in a community of 400 people. Barter and commodity exchange fill other gaps. A farmer might trade grain, butter, meat, timber, labour. A craftsman may exchange services. Accounts can be settled through networks of obligations rather than a single exchange of cash. You repair my wagon. I provide your household with firewood. The shopkeeper credits me for wheat. Someone else owes the shopkeeper money. After enough transactions, the local economy begins looking less like a cash register and more like several families solving a puzzle nobody wrote down properly. Prices can vary too. War disrupts trade. Imports become harder to obtain. Shipping becomes dangerous. British blockades and military operations interfere with normal commerce. Goods that once arrived regularly become scarce. Scarcity increases prices. Merchants are accused of profiteering. People complain about hoarding. Authorities occasionally attempt price controls. Everyone becomes extremely interested in the moral character of whoever currently has flour. And this is where ordinary economics begins touching politics. Boycotts of British goods have already made consumption political. Buying imported cloth, tea, or luxury products can carry ideological meaning. Producing homespun can be praised as patriotic. Merchants must navigate changing loyalties, shortages, trade restrictions, and public suspicion. Even shopping has acquired a political position. You only wanted a new coat. Apparently it now says something about imperial policy. By the end of the transaction, the shopkeeper opens his account book, writes your name, adds the amount. You hand over a little coin. Promise the rest after harvest. He nods. This is acceptable. You leave carrying what you needed. No card has been tapped. No receipt has been emailed. No bank has approved anything. The entire transaction rests on reputation, memory, handwriting, and the assumption that both of you will still be here in October. It is not a simple financial system, but it works. Mostly, provided everyone remembers who owes whom the pig. 17. The tavern is a pub, hotel, restaurant, newsroom, and rumour exchange. Sooner or later, you end up at the tavern. Perhaps you are travelling. Perhaps you have business in town. Perhaps you have finished several hours of work and would like a drink somewhere that does not contain 3 children, a spinning wheel, and a chicken investigating the doorway. Whatever the reason, the tavern in 1776 is doing far more than serving alcohol. It is part pub, part restaurant, part hotel, part meeting room, part post office, part news centre, part political headquarters, and part uncontrolled distribution system for information that may or may not have survived contact with the person telling it. You step inside. The room is warm from the fire and crowded with smoke, damp wool, leather, spilled drink, food, tobacco, and the general atmosphere produced when several dozen people have spent the day outdoors and then entered the same enclosed space. Tables are plain. Benches are crowded. Mugs and cups move constantly. Someone is eating. Someone is arguing. Someone else is reading a newspaper aloud because not everyone in the room can read it themselves. And even among those who can, there may be only one copy. This immediately makes the tavern politically important. Newspapers arrive. Letters arrive. Travellers arrive carrying information from places farther away. A merchant from Philadelphia has heard something about Congress. A wagoner knows which road is washed out. A sailor claims British ships have been sighted. A man at the end of the table says his cousin knows somebody serving under Washington, and therefore has information everyone else should stop talking long enough to hear. Nobody does. News in 1776 is social. You do not receive it alone. You receive it surrounded by opinions. A tavern keeper may maintain newspapers from different towns, and customers read or discuss them collectively. Pamphlets circulate. Broadsides appear. Political arguments develop quickly because almost every major issue in the colonies has now acquired the ability to ruin an otherwise pleasant drink. Independence, taxes, British troops, militia service, trade, currency, loyalists, Congress. There is always something, and because this is a society without radio, television, or social media, taverns become places where information is repeated until everyone has heard it. This does not make the information more accurate. It merely makes it popular. The tavern also feeds you. Depending on the establishment and what is available, you might get bread, cheese, meat, stew, porridge, eggs, vegetables, or whatever the kitchen has prepared. Do not expect a printed menu with 17 choices. The menu is often whatever exists. You ask what there is. The keeper tells you. You decide whether hunger has made that acceptable. Usually it has. Then there is the drink. Cider is widespread. Beer and ale are common. Rum is enormously popular in the colonies, particularly in port communities where Atlantic trade has made molasses and distilled spirits commercially important. Punch may appear, mixed from spirits, water, sugar, citrus, where available, and spices. Wine is available for those with money. Stronger drink is not reserved for the evening either. Alcohol occupies a much more ordinary place in 18th century social life than modern habits might suggest. This does not mean everyone is permanently drunk. It means drinking is woven into hospitality, business, travel, celebration, politics, and conversation. Naturally, some people still manage to become permanently drunk. Human beings remain committed to exceeding recommended quantities even before recommended quantities exist. If you are travelling, the tavern may also be where you sleep, and this is where modern expectations suffer another setback. A room may not be private. A bed may not be private. Busy inns can place multiple travellers in the same room, and sharing a bed with another guest is not automatically considered extraordinary. You have met this man 12 minutes ago. You now know his political opinions, his destination, and shortly whether he snores. Hospitality has become intimate very quickly. Outside, horses are being fed or stabled. Wagons sit in the yard. Inside, deals are made. Debts are discussed. Local officials meet. Militia matters may be organised. Elections and public affairs are debated. In some places, court business, auctions, or community meetings happen in tavern rooms because the tavern already has what civic life requires: space, tables, food, drink, and people. By evening, you know considerably more than you did when you entered. Some of it may even be true. You know which regiment passed through yesterday, which merchant has raised his prices, which neighbour may secretly favour the crown, which bridge is damaged, which family has received a letter from Boston, and why two men near the fireplace are no longer speaking to each other. You finish your drink. The room keeps talking. Tomorrow, every story will travel outward again. Some will reach the next town. Some will change on the road. And one completely unverified rumour will arrive before breakfast and somehow become common knowledge by noon. The tavern has done its work. 18. Going 20 miles can consume most of your day and several important vertebrae. Now you need to travel, which is unfortunate because travelling 20 miles in 1776 is not the minor inconvenience your modern brain thinks it is. There is no motorway, no train, no air-conditioned car, no navigation system calmly announcing that a faster route has been found. There is a road, probably, and the road has opinions. If you are travelling on foot, 20 miles is entirely possible in a long day. Assuming the weather is reasonable, your shoes remain intact, and nothing along the route requires you to stop. That last condition is ambitious. You may encounter mud, a damaged bridge, a swollen stream, a fallen tree, a wagon blocking the road, loose livestock, a stranger who wants directions, or an inn that appears at exactly the moment your feet decide they have completed enough 18th century history for one afternoon. Walking is normal because legs are relatively reliable. They do not require feed. They do not lose horseshoes. They do not throw you into a ditch because a bird moved unexpectedly. A horse, however, is faster. If you own one, that is an important qualification. Horses are expensive to buy and maintain. They need food, water, grooming, shelter, tack, shoeing, and regular care. A good riding horse is useful property, not an 18th century version of something you casually leave parked outside because you forgot where you put it. If you travel on horseback, the journey improves. Notice that I said improves, not becomes comfortable. The saddle is leather. The road remains dreadful. After several hours, your body begins identifying entirely new places in which discomfort can occur. Then there are wagons and carriages. If you have luggage, merchandise, children, tools, barrels, farm produce, or anything else too large to strap hopefully onto a horse, wheels become necessary. Unfortunately, 18th century roads appear to regard wheels as a challenge. Heavy rain turns dirt roads into mud. Deep mud creates ruts. Wagon wheels deepen those ruts. Then the sun dries everything solid. You now have a road made from hardened trenches. The next wagon arrives. Everyone suffers. Suspension exists on some carriages, particularly better ones, but nobody is floating smoothly over the landscape. Ordinary carts and wagons transmit an impressive amount of geography directly into your spine. You feel every stone, every hole, every root. Every part of the road appears personally. Modern cars advertise handling so smooth that you barely notice the surface. An 18th century wagon wants you to know exactly what county you are passing through by touch. Road quality varies enormously. Routes near major towns and commercial centres may receive more attention. Local governments and communities require road maintenance, and property owners can sometimes be obligated to contribute labour toward keeping roads passable. The word passable is doing heroic work. A road can be officially maintained and still become nearly useless after prolonged rain. Bridges create another difficulty. Some rivers have bridges, others require ferries. Small streams may simply be forded. You guide the horse or wagon into the water and trust that everyone involved has made approximately the same assessment of depth. Sometimes they have. Sometimes your luggage learns to swim. Ferries are essential throughout the colonies. A flatboat or ferry carries people, horses, wagons and goods across rivers where bridges are absent. You wait your turn, pay the fee, load carefully. Then spend several minutes watching a man move your entire transport system across open water using technology that suddenly looks far simpler when you are standing on it. Travel after dark is especially unpleasant. Roads are not illuminated. There are no reflective signs, no painted lines, no petrol station glowing reassuringly 3 miles ahead. Once daylight disappears, the world beyond towns becomes intensely dark, so journeys are planned around daylight and stopping places. Taverns and inns become crucial. There you can eat, rest, stable the horse, hear news, and discover whether tomorrow's road is currently described as bad, very bad, or the particularly reassuring you may wish to wait. Season matters enormously. Summer dust coats clothing. Autumn rain creates mud. Winter brings snow and ice. Spring contributes mud again because the road apparently missed it. A trip that takes 1 day in good conditions may take much longer when weather turns. This changes how people think about distance. 20 miles is not merely 20 miles. It is time, food, horse feed, tavern costs, weather, road conditions, river crossings, and the possibility that the wheel may decide it has been attached to the wagon long enough. By late afternoon, you finally see your destination ahead. Your clothes are dusty, your horse is tired, your back has submitted a formal complaint. You have travelled perhaps 20 miles. In the modern world, that is an inconvenient commute. In 1776, you have completed an expedition. 19. News travels at the speed of horse ship, printing press, and whoever heard something first. Information moves surprisingly well considering nobody can send a message instantly, but it still moves at the speed of something with legs, sails, or ink. There is no telephone, no radio, no television, no text message, no little rectangle in your pocket vibrating because something has happened 6,000 miles away, and apparently you are expected to have an opinion about it before breakfast. In 1776, if something important happens, somebody has to physically carry the information. A rider takes a letter, a ship carries dispatches, a traveller tells a tavern keeper, a printer receives a report, a newspaper reproduces it, someone reads that newspaper aloud. Then 12 people repeat the story with varying levels of accuracy until the original event has acquired 3 extra regiments and a horse that probably never existed. This is how news works, and considering the circumstances, it can travel remarkably quickly. The colonies already possess postal routes linking major towns. Riders move letters and newspapers along established roads, while coastal shipping carries information between ports. A letter from Philadelphia to Boston is not instant, but it is entirely practical. Weather matters. Road conditions matter. War matters. Whether the horse has decided to remain cooperative matters. But correspondence moves constantly. Merchants depend on it. Officials depend on it. Military commanders depend on it. Families depend on it. A society spread across hundreds of miles has become very good at moving paper. Newspapers are especially important. By 1776, colonial America has a lively print culture, and printers in cities and towns publish newspapers filled with political essays, foreign reports, shipping news, advertisements, Official notices, local announcements, and arguments conducted with the calm restraint of people who have discovered movable type and immediately decided to use it against each other. Printers copy material from other newspapers constantly. A report printed in Boston may be reprinted in New York, then Philadelphia, then somewhere farther south. This creates a network of information in which one printed story can travel far beyond the place where it began. There is no copyright department sending concerned letters. If the story is useful, you print it. Pamphlets travel too. And 1776 is an excellent year for pamphlets. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, published in January, spreads rapidly and helps push public discussion toward independence. People buy it, borrow it, read it aloud, argue over it. Printers produce edition after edition. The 18th century does not have viral posts. It has pamphlets that refuse to stop appearing in taverns. Broadsides are even faster. A broadside is a single printed sheet designed for quick public distribution. Official declarations, political notices, military news, songs, advertisements, and major announcements can all appear this way. You nail one to a wall, post another outside a tavern, read one aloud in a public square. Suddenly an entire town knows something, or thinks it knows something. That distinction remains important. Rumour is faster than print, always has been. A traveller arrives from New York and says British ships have been seen. How many? He heard 30. Someone else says 50. By supper, an elderly man near the hearth is explaining confidently that the entire Royal Navy is coming up the river. Nobody knows where he got this. Possibly from his own emotional state. Military news is particularly vulnerable to distortion. A battle happens. A messenger leaves. Reports emerge from soldiers, officers, civilians, prisoners, sailors, and frightened people who saw smoke from several miles away. One side claims victory. The other side also claims victory. Numbers are wrong. Names are misspelled. Casualties are exaggerated. Then corrected. Then exaggerated differently. The 18th century news cycle is slower than yours. It is not necessarily calmer. Public readings help information reach people who cannot read or who do not own newspapers. A tavern patron may read a report aloud. A minister may mention events from the pulpit. A town official may announce news publicly. When important documents arrive, crowds gather to hear them. News is often experienced collectively. You do not sit alone scrolling through events. You stand beside neighbours while someone unfolds a sheet of paper and begins reading. Everyone reacts at once. Someone cheers. Someone mutters. Someone says the report cannot possibly be true. Someone else has already left to repeat it elsewhere. And that is how a message travels. Horse to town. Paper to printer. Printer to tavern. Tavern to neighbour. Neighbour to farm. Farm to another traveller. By the time it reaches you, the event may be several days old. But to you, it has just happened. There are no breaking news alerts. Only breaking news eventually arriving on horseback, and the horse looks tired. 20. The war has already been happening for more than a year. This is important because 1776 does not begin with the Declaration of Independence. By January, people have already been fighting for months. Lexington and Concord happened the previous April. Bunker Hill happened in June. George Washington has taken command of the Continental Army. Boston has been under siege. Men have left farms, workshops, shops, fishing boats, and families to become soldiers in an army that is still trying to work out exactly what an American army is supposed to look like. So when you wake up in 1776, the revolution is not a dramatic event waiting for July. It is already part of ordinary life, and ordinary life has become inconvenient. If you live near Boston, the war is impossible to ignore. British troops have occupied the town while American forces surround it from the countryside. Families have been divided. Trade has been disrupted. Roads are watched. Supplies move toward military camps. Refugees leave areas affected by fighting. People who once travelled routinely now think carefully about who controls the road ahead and whether someone carrying a musket is likely to ask questions. Then, in March, something extraordinary happens. Washington's forces place artillery on Dorchester Heights overlooking Boston. The guns have travelled all the way from Fort Ticonderoga, dragged through winter conditions in one of those logistical achievements that sounds impressive until you imagine being the person actually pulling cannon through snow. The British position becomes difficult to hold. On March 17th, British troops evacuate Boston. American supporters celebrate. Boston is effectively liberated, and for approximately 5 minutes everyone has the pleasant illusion that perhaps the difficult part is over. It is not. The British sail away. The war follows them. Attention shifts toward New York, and New York is far more vulnerable. It has a large harbour. It sits in a strategically crucial position. British naval power can reach it easily. Washington begins moving troops there because everyone understands that something large is coming. Something very large. By summer, British forces gather around New York in enormous numbers, supported by one of the most powerful navies in the world. For ordinary civilians, this means uncertainty. Do you stay? Do you leave? Do you hide valuables? Do you sell livestock before soldiers take it? Do you support the rebellion openly? Do you keep your opinions to yourself? War has a remarkable ability to turn very normal household decisions into political calculations, and armies consume everything. Not metaphorically, actually everything. Soldiers need bread, meat, flour, salt, rum, blankets, shoes, coats, shirts, stockings, tents, firewood, horses, wagons, leather, iron, gunpowder, paper, candles, medical supplies. If several thousand men camp near your community, the local economy notices immediately. Prices can rise. Supplies disappear. Farmers are asked or required to provide food and transport. Wagons are hired or requisitioned. Horses become military assets. A barn that yesterday contained hay may tomorrow contain soldiers, and soldiers themselves are not living comfortably. The Continental Army struggles constantly with supply. Pay is irregular. Uniforms are inconsistent. Some men arrive properly equipped. Others do not. Weapons vary. Training varies. Discipline varies. Enlistments expire, sometimes at exactly the moment commanders would prefer everyone not to go home. Disease is often as serious a threat as battle. Military camps bring thousands of people together under conditions involving poor sanitation, contaminated water, inadequate shelter, and absolutely no understanding of germ theory. Smallpox is particularly feared. Dysentery spreads. Fevers spread. Men become sick without ever seeing the enemy. War is heroic in paintings. In camp, a great deal of it is coughing. For civilians, news of battles creates another kind of strain. A husband may be away. A son may be away. A brother may be serving with a militia company. Then a rider arrives. A battle has happened. Nobody knows exactly who survived. Letters take time. Rumours arrive first. You may spend days knowing that fighting occurred without knowing whether someone you love is alive. And there is still farm work to do. That is the strange thing about 1776. The war can feel enormous and ordinary at the same time. A British fleet may be approaching. Congress may be debating independence. Washington may be moving thousands of troops. And somewhere in a farmhouse, somebody is still trying to repair a broken fence before the cow discovers it. History is happening, but supper still needs cooking, and the army would also like some. 21. The militia means your neighbours have muskets, and suddenly everybody needs supplies. For many free men of military age, militia service is not something the revolution suddenly invents. Colonial governments have required various forms of local military service for generations, although the rules differ from colony to colony. In many communities, able-bodied free men within certain age ranges are expected to enroll, appear for musters, maintain weapons where possible, and be available when local authorities call. In peaceful times, this can feel almost routine. You gather on the town green. Someone attempts to organize everyone into lines. A captain shouts instructions. Several men know what they are doing. Several others are mostly hoping nobody notices that they do not. Then somebody produces food or drink, and the day becomes considerably more social. A militia muster can be training, civic obligation, local spectacle, and neighbourhood gathering all at once. Then the war begins. Suddenly the muskets matter. If you are called out, you may leave the farm, shop, workshop, or fishing boat with very little warning. You need a firearm if you have one, a cartridge box or powder horn, a blanket, clothing, food, perhaps a canteen, anything else you can reasonably carry without turning yourself into a moving furniture sale. The famous image of the revolutionary militiaman standing magnificently with his musket tends to skip the moment immediately before departure when his wife is asking whether he remembered the spare stockings. This matters, because armies are built out of ordinary objects. Your musket may be impressive, but you cannot eat it. You need bread, flour, salt meat, shoes, shirts, stockings, blankets, tents, firewood, wagons, horses, leather, iron, soap, candles, medical supplies, and an almost supernatural quantity of patience. Local communities therefore become part of the military supply system, whether they intended to or not. A farmer may be asked to sell grain. A wagon owner may be hired to transport provisions. A blacksmith repairs equipment. A shoemaker receives orders. Women sew shirts, prepare food, make cartridges in some circumstances, nurse sick soldiers, and manage farms or businesses while men are away. Children take on extra work. The war does not merely remove people from households. It leaves the remaining people with everything those absent hands used to do. And militia service itself can be unpredictable. You may be called for a short emergency. Perhaps enemy troops have been reported nearby. Perhaps a coastal community fears a raid. Perhaps regular continental troops require reinforcement. You march out. Nothing happens. You return home. 3 days later, another alarm arrives. You go again. Military history contains a surprising amount of walking somewhere, because somebody thought something might happen there. The distinction between militia and the Continental Army is important. Militia units generally serve under colonial and later state authority, often for shorter periods and closer to home. The Continental Army is meant to provide a more permanent, professional military force under congressional authority and Washington's command. In practice, the two systems constantly interact. Continental commanders need militia support. Militia forces can provide manpower quickly because they already exist locally, but they may also go home when their legal service ends or when agricultural obligations become impossible to ignore. This frustrates professional officers enormously. From the farmer's perspective, however, the wheat does not stop growing because General Washington has strategic concerns. Someone has to harvest it, and then there is equipment. Militia laws may expect men to provide weapons and accoutrements, but reality is uneven. Not every household possesses a good musket. Firearms vary in condition and type. A hunting gun is not necessarily ideal military equipment. Powder and lead are precious. Imported military supplies have become harder to obtain because the people previously supplying many of them are now the enemy. Congress and colonial governments scramble to acquire arms. Gunsmiths repair and manufacture what they can. Foreign supplies become increasingly important. The revolution is discovering one of war's oldest truths. Declaring independence is comparatively cheap. Supplying it is expensive. Even food creates conflict. Authorities may purchase supplies. They may requisition them. Prices rise. Farmers may prefer selling goods where they can receive reliable money rather than depreciating paper currency or promises of future payment. Military necessity and civilian economics begin staring unhappily at each other across the barnyard. And through all of this, the militia consists largely of people you know. The captain might be a local merchant. The man beside you might own the farm across the road. Another sits 2 pews behind you at church. You trained together, argued together, borrowed tools from one another. Now everyone is standing in a field holding firearms while someone explains how to load them under pressure. It is both deeply serious and strangely domestic. By evening, the company may march away. The road fills with neighbours carrying muskets, packs, blankets, and whatever food they could bring. Behind them, families return to chores. Animals still need feeding. Fields still need tending. And somewhere ahead, the army is waiting for supplies. Mostly the supplies you just watched walk out of town. 22. Then someone reads the declaration, and apparently, you live in a new country. Now. By July, events in Philadelphia produce something extraordinary. Because after more than a year of fighting, petitions, arguments, failed compromises, military disasters, hopeful rumours, angry pamphlets, and several colonies gradually deciding that reconciliation with Britain may no longer be realistic, the political conversation changes. Independence is no longer merely the dangerous idea discussed quietly over drinks. It is becoming policy. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress votes in favour of independence. That is the crucial legal decision. 2 days later, on July 4th, Congress approves the final wording of the Declaration of Independence, explaining why the colonies believe they are justified in separating from Britain. And somewhere in Philadelphia, printers immediately acquire a great deal of work. The document has to travel. Remember, there is no television announcement, no live broadcast from Independence Hall, no notification appears on your phone saying, "America has left the British Empire. Tap for details." The words must be printed. John Dunlap, a Philadelphia printer, produces broadside copies during the night following congressional approval. Those sheets are then dispatched outward, to military commanders, to colonial governments, to committees, to towns, to newspapers. Copies generate more copies. Messengers carry them along roads. Printers reproduce the text. Eventually, the declaration reaches ordinary people. Perhaps you are standing in a town square when somebody begins reading it aloud. A crowd gathers. You hear phrases about equality, natural rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, government deriving power from the consent of the governed. These are enormous ideas, and they sound especially enormous when spoken aloud in a world where most people possess very little direct political power. The reaction is not universal celebration. That is important. If you support independence, this may feel exhilarating. Months of uncertainty have produced a clear answer. The colonies are no longer merely resisting certain policies. They are declaring themselves separate states. You cheer. Perhaps church bells ring. Perhaps people drink. Perhaps someone gives a speech considerably longer than anybody requested. In New York City, after the declaration is publicly read on July 9th, a crowd pulls down the equestrian statue of King George III at Bowling Green. The lead from the statue is later used for musket balls. Symbolism has rarely been recycled so efficiently. But perhaps you are a loyalist. Then this is not liberation. It is rebellion, possibly treason. You may believe Parliament has made mistakes while still considering independence reckless. You may fear economic collapse, civil war, British retaliation, the destruction of trade. You may simply look at Britain's enormous navy and wonder whether everyone in Congress has recently inspected it. Or perhaps you are trying desperately not to take a side. The declaration does not make that easier. Political neutrality becomes increasingly suspicious. Everyone wants to know where you stand. Your neighbours notice what you say, what you do not say, whether you attend celebrations, whether you drink the toast, whether you still display anything connected with the crown. Silence itself can begin sounding political. And then there is the contradiction inside the document. You hear that all men are created equal. If you are enslaved, those words land differently. Your labour is still owned. Your movement is still controlled. Your family can still be separated. The new political language promises universal principles while the society producing it continues slavery. The contradiction is visible immediately. It will not disappear when the ink dries. Women hear these claims as well while possessing almost no formal political voice. Indigenous nations hear colonists speak about liberty, while colonial settlement continues pressing onto indigenous lands. The Declaration creates extraordinary ideals. It does not suddenly create a society that lives up to them, and nothing physical changes overnight. The road outside is still muddy. The cow still needs milking. Your debt at the shop still exists. The army still needs food. British troops have not vanished because Congress wrote firmly worded paragraphs about them. In fact, a massive British force is gathering around New York. The hardest fighting is still ahead. That evening, you return home knowing something fundamental has changed. Yesterday, you lived in colonies rebelling against their government. Today, according to Congress, you belong to independent states. There is no new flag hanging from every doorway, no new currency that everyone trusts, no guarantee the experiment survives until Christmas. You lie down in the same bed, under the same roof, with the same chores waiting tomorrow. You apparently live in a new country now. Someone should probably tell the British. 23. Your neighbour may be a patriot, a loyalist, or hoping desperately nobody asks. The revolution divides communities far more messily than later patriotic memory suggests. It is tempting to imagine 1776 as a tidy landscape of determined patriots facing one obvious enemy across the Atlantic. Real life is much less cooperative. Your neighbour may support independence. The man across the road may remain loyal to the king. Your brother may have joined the Continental Army. Your uncle may think Congress has lost its mind. And the family at the end of the lane may have decided their political position is whatever prevents armed men from entering the barn. There are no neat lines running through the countryside separating patriots from loyalists. The divisions pass directly through towns, churches, businesses, friendships, and families, Some colonists have supported resistance to British taxation for years but still hesitate at independence. Opposing Parliament does not automatically mean wanting to leave the empire entirely. Britain is familiar. British trade matters. British law is familiar. The Royal Navy is terrifyingly large. Declaring independence from one of the world's strongest powers can look less like heroic destiny and more like a very elaborate way of getting your house burned down. Then there are committed loyalists. Some genuinely believe monarchy and imperial government provide stability. Some have commercial connections to Britain. Some hold government positions linked to the crown. Some distrust revolutionary leaders. Some fear popular disorder more than British authority. Others simply believe rebellion is illegal and that Congress has no legitimate right to dissolve the political relationship. These people do not disappear when independence is declared. They become more uncomfortable. Your politics can now affect whether neighbours trust you, whether customers enter your shop, whether committees watch you, whether militia officers consider you reliable, whether someone reports something you said in a tavern after 3 mugs of cider and one regrettably confident opinion. Local revolutionary committees have already become powerful in many places. Committees of safety and inspection enforce boycotts, organise resistance, gather supplies, supervise suspected loyalists, and help turn revolutionary politics into local administration. This means politics is not happening safely hundreds of miles away. Politics knows where you live. Perhaps you refuse to sign an association supporting the revolutionary cause. People notice. Perhaps you continue trading with someone regarded as loyal to Britain. People notice. Perhaps you speak warmly about King George. People definitely notice. The 18th century has no social media. It has neighbours. This may be worse. Loyalists can face harassment, public humiliation, confiscation of property, arrest, or pressure to leave, depending on place and circumstance. Some flee to areas under British control. Others eventually leave the colonies entirely. Some remain quietly where they are and try to attract as little attention as possible. Patriots face danger too, especially wherever British forces regain control. Supporting independence openly can become extremely risky if the army you oppose suddenly occupies your town. Yesterday you were a respected revolutionary. Today a British officer would like to know your name. Political convictions become strangely dependent on who currently controls the road. Families can split as well. A father remains loyal. A son supports independence. Brothers choose different sides. One relative serves in the Continental Army while another joins a loyalist regiment. Imagine the family dinner. Nobody has invented the phrase agree to disagree. There is also a large middle ground of people whose loyalties are complicated, weak, changing, or deeply practical. They may dislike British taxation but dislike revolutionary disruption too. They may support whichever side appears likely to win locally. They may simply want to protect family, land, livestock, and business. The war makes this increasingly difficult. Both sides need food. Both sides want information. Both sides may demand service, transport, horses, or supplies. If British soldiers arrive, refusing them can be dangerous. If Patriot forces arrive tomorrow and discover you helped the British yesterday, that can also be dangerous. Neutrality begins requiring the strategic skill of a professional diplomat, and rumours make everything worse. Someone says your neighbour has been corresponding with British officers. Someone else says he merely sold them hay. Another person says the hay sale itself proves everything. By evening, a perfectly ordinary agricultural transaction has become treason. You walk home carefully. The same houses line the road, the same fences, the same fields, the same people you have known for years. But now, every conversation has another layer beneath it. Patriot, loyalist, neutral, suspicious. Nobody wears a convenient label. You wave to your neighbour. He waves back. Neither of you mentions politics. This is probably the healthiest relationship in the colonies. 24. Getting sick means the treatment may become a completely separate problem. Eventually somebody becomes ill. Because 1776 has no shortage of opportunities. There are contaminated wells, crowded towns, open wounds, bad teeth, food stored without refrigeration, mosquitoes, childbirth, accidents involving axes, horses, fire, tools, wagons, guns, and the general 18th century commitment to placing the human body near things capable of injuring it. And when sickness arrives, modern medicine is not coming. There are physicians, certainly. There are surgeons, apothecaries, midwives, experienced neighbours, domestic remedies passed through families, medical books owned by literate households. There is also an enormous quantity of confidence attached to ideas that will eventually make future doctors stare quietly at the wall. If you develop a fever, the first response may happen at home. Someone puts you to bed. You are kept warm, or cooled, or both at different times depending on who has entered the room and what theory they currently favour. You receive broth, herbal preparations, tea, perhaps something containing bark, roots, alcohol, molasses, or whatever household medicine has previously acquired a reputation for helping. Some remedies are genuinely useful. Rest is useful. Fluids are useful. Certain plant medicines contain active compounds that actually do affect symptoms. Others are mainly providing everyone with the comforting sense that something is being done. Then the physician arrives. This can be good news. It can also dramatically increase the number of things happening to you. Medicine in the 18th century is still heavily influenced by older theories about balancing the body's fluids and correcting internal excesses. Bloodletting remains common. So, if you are feverish, inflamed, suffering from a headache, experiencing chest pain, or simply presenting symptoms that a physician finds suspiciously enthusiastic, he may decide you possess too much blood. This is solved elegantly. By removing some, a lancet opens a vein. Blood flows into a bowl. You lie there already weak from illness, while everyone watches several additional ounces of your strength leave voluntarily. The physician nods. Treatment is underway. Purging is another favourite. If disease represents something harmful trapped inside the body, then clearly the answer may be to persuade the body to empty itself with extraordinary determination. Laxatives and emetics are used for this purpose. Mercury compounds can appear in medicines as well, particularly calomel, which becomes extremely popular in American medicine. It certainly produces effects. The fact that mercury poisoning is also an effect remains inconveniently outside current medical understanding. You began the morning with stomach trouble. By afternoon, medicine has given your stomach a much clearer objective. Then there are injuries. If you cut yourself while chopping wood, the wound is cleaned according to whatever knowledge and materials are available. Perhaps bandaged, perhaps treated with salves. If infection develops, nobody understands bacteria. They can recognize that wounds sometimes become foul, swollen, painful, and dangerous. They simply cannot explain the invisible mechanism causing it. Surgeons can set broken bones, remove damaged tissue, drain abscesses, extract bullets, amputate limbs. Some are highly skilled at the physical mechanics of their craft. The problem is that anesthesia has not arrived. Neither has antiseptic surgery. If an operation is necessary, alcohol may be offered. Assistance may hold you. Speed becomes a form of mercy. A surgeon who can finish quickly is admired for excellent reason. The operation hurts. Then comes the dangerous part. Surviving what happens afterward. Instruments are not sterilized according to modern standards. Hands are not scrubbed with germ theory in mind. Dressings may introduce contamination. Post-operative infection can turn a technically successful procedure into a fatal one. The surgeon did everything correctly by the standards of 1776. The bacteria were operating several decades ahead of the curriculum. Smallpox is one of the greatest fears of the age. People know exactly how dangerous it is. They also know about inoculation, or variolation, in which material from a smallpox sore is deliberately introduced into a healthy person to produce what is hoped will be a milder case, followed by immunity. The practice can save lives. It can also spread infection and occasionally kill the person being inoculated. So communities argue over it. Of course they do. Even life-saving medicine has managed to become political. Childbirth creates another entire medical world. Most births happen at home, attended primarily by midwives and other women. Experienced midwives possess enormous practical knowledge, but when severe bleeding, obstructed labour, infection, or other complications arise, options are brutally limited. There are no blood transfusions, no antibiotics, no safe modern surgery waiting down the hall. You rely on experience, endurance, luck, and whoever is standing beside the bed. And through all of this, ordinary families understand something important. Calling the doctor does not guarantee recovery. Sometimes you get better because the treatment helps. Sometimes, despite the treatment, sometimes the illness passes naturally. And sometimes nothing anyone knows how to do is enough. You lie beneath the blankets while the physician packs his instruments. He has bled you, prescribed medicine, given instructions. Everyone thanks him. You feel considerably weaker than when he arrived. Apparently this means it is working. 25. You go to bed in a country that did not exist when the year began. And finally, evening settles over the house. And after a day of hauling, cooking, mending, walking, arguing, carrying, working, and generally surviving the 18th century through sustained manual effort, the household begins to slow, not stop. That would be too generous. Just slow. The last jobs happen by firelight. Tools are brought inside or put away. Animals are checked. A cow is milked one final time if the household routine requires it. Chickens settle into whatever arrangement chickens have collectively decided counts as order. Doors are secured. Shutters close against the night. And anything left outside is considered against the possibility that weather, animals, thieves, or wandering soldiers may develop an interest in it before morning. The hearth now changes purpose. All day it has cooked, boiled, heated, dried, and smoked. Now the fire is allowed to burn lower. You do not simply extinguish it. That would mean beginning tomorrow with flint, steel, tinder, kindling, patience, and unnecessary emotional difficulty. Instead, the coals are carefully banked beneath ash. If everything goes well, some heat survives through the night. Tomorrow morning you uncover the embers, add tinder, blow gently, and civilization resumes. If everything does not go well, tomorrow begins with disappointment. Candles provide the remaining light. And candles are expensive enough that nobody is illuminating rooms for decorative effect. A tallow candle gives you a small, wavering circle of yellow light. Beyond it, the room disappears quickly into shadow. You sew close to the flame, read close to it, talk beside it, and occasionally discover that something you thought was a coat hanging in the corner has become briefly sinister because human imagination was apparently designed before electric lighting. Books and newspapers may come out if the household owns them. Someone reads aloud, perhaps scripture, perhaps a newspaper already several days old, perhaps another report about the war, perhaps the declaration itself if a copy or reprinting has reached your community. And that is when the strangeness of this particular year returns, because the words being discussed beside your hearth are enormous. Independence, republic, liberty, war, Britain, Congress, Washington, the future. But the room remains deeply ordinary. Someone is darning a stocking. A child has fallen asleep against another child. Your boots are drying near the hearth. There is a bowl that still needs cleaning. A dog is occupying a section of floor with the confidence of a creature who has paid no taxes and intends to keep it that way. This is how history usually feels while it is happening. Not like history. Like Wednesday. By late 1776, the new nation is still frighteningly uncertain. The Declaration has announced independence. That does not mean independence has been secured. British forces have driven Washington's army from New York. The Continental Army has suffered losses. Men are deserting or reaching the end of enlistments. Money is uncertain. Supplies are short. Loyalists remain active. British troops remain powerful. If you are sitting beside the fire in December, there are perfectly reasonable grounds for wondering whether the revolution is about to collapse. You do not know about Yorktown. You do not know there will eventually be a constitution. You do not know that George Washington will become president. You do not know that Americans 2.5 centuries later will place 1776 on shirts, bumper stickers, coffee mugs, and an impressive range of objects nobody in the 18th century could identify. You know only what has happened so far. And what has happened so far looks alarmingly unfinished. The uncertainty is different depending on who you are. If you are enslaved, independence has not made you free. If you belong to an indigenous nation, the new political order may threaten your lands more rather than less. If you are a loyalist, the country being celebrated around you may feel like the destruction of your own. If you are a woman, the new language of political rights still leaves you almost entirely outside formal political power. The birth of the United States is not experienced equally. It is not even experienced as good news by everyone. But ordinary life continues around these contradictions. You remove your outer clothing carefully because clothing is too valuable to throw into a pile. Shoes are placed where they can dry. Stockings come off. The shirt or shift worn against your skin may be changed if clean linen is available. Then everyone negotiates the sleeping arrangements again. Children climb into shared beds. Adults settle onto mattresses of feathers, straw, wool, or whatever the household possesses. Curtains may be drawn around a better bed to retain warmth. Blankets are pulled up. The room grows colder as the hearth fades. Outside, the darkness is enormous. There are no illuminated highways, no glowing suburbs, no aircraft blinking above the clouds. Away from a large town, there may be almost nothing visible beyond moonlight, stars, and perhaps another household's distant candle. You hear wind, animals, timber contracting in the cold, perhaps rain against the roof, perhaps a horse shifting in the stable, perhaps somebody beside you breathing with the calm confidence of a person who will soon begin snoring. Tomorrow will bring the same basic problems. Water must be carried, the fire must be revived, food must be prepared, animals must be fed, clothes must be repaired. Fields, shops, workshops, children, roads, debts, rumours, politics and war will all still be waiting. You close your eyes. You are living in a country that did not officially exist when this year began. Nobody knows whether it will survive, and at sunrise, regardless of the fate of the Republic, the cow will still need milking.